Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Almost said Tuesday. Doing the buy sell hold yesterday kind of messed up my Irish Breakdown internal clock because that's always kind of my benchmark for halfway through the week. But happy Wednesday, everybody. And we have another loaded show coming your way. Lots of news to talk about. Notre Dame finalized their schedule with BYU. We know now what day that's kicking off. Jason Onye is returning to the team for his 6th year. We're going to cover both of those things in part 1 of today's show. Part 2 and 3 of today's show is we're going to be breaking down high-level view of Notre Dame's offense. It's kind of a review of what they have going into the 2026 season. So talking about what they lost, who comes back, expectations. So, Brian, this almost feels like kind of the first show that we get to do that fully, now that the transfer portal is now officially done. There, of departures.
Nobody jumped in as far as we know. So at last night, midnight was supposed to be when. So unless something happened and it hasn't been announced yet, which I doubt that any prominent Notre Dame players or any Notre Dame players jumped in and it wasn't talked about. So yeah, we can now look at this 100-man roster team, which is absolutely bonkers, with 13 D tackles and 15 wide receivers and 20 offensive linemen. It's pretty nuts. Pretty nuts.
Absolutely loaded, man. Absolutely loaded. But before we kind of dive into the roster stuff, let's talk about the Notre Dame BYU game. Obviously, we know that BYU was put on the schedule literally minutes after it was announced that the USC Notre Dame rivalry was essentially on a long and elongated pause.
Minutes might actually be stretching it a little bit. It might have literally been like a minute. Yeah. I say that jokingly, but yeah, they were ready. They were ready. I was one of the few moves that we know of that Pete Bavach was done that you're like, okay, this guy's got a chance.
Absolutely. But we love the move. But we actually had a couple of buy-sell hold questions about, the future schedule and things like that in yesterday's show, and we got a little bit of clarity today. And Notre Dame will be playing BYU out in Provo, Utah. Obviously, you guys know that there's a home-and-home series. Notre Dame was traveling out west in this upcoming season, and then they're going to be playing in South Bend in 2027. They will be playing BYU on October 17th of 2025. I believe the kickoff time is still yet to be announced. Odds are it'll probably end up being a night game if I had to guess. But now we have a solidified date, and we have an idea of what that's going to look like in October.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Trev. Obviously, you look at where it fits. There's likely going to be a bye either right before or right after Notre Dame plays BYU. Not a given, but it's looking like there's a chance for that. Obviously, the first weekend of September 6th against Wisconsin. That's a Sunday. Until October 3rd, Notre Dame has games booked up. There's now an open date in between the 3rd and the 17th when they play BYU. And there's an open date between the 17th and the 31st when they play Navy. I'm kind of hoping that October 24th is open because I have a feeling that's going to be close to when midterms are for Notre Dame. And be nice to have a little break there. So you kind of play, what would that be, 4, 5, 6 straight games, then a bye, then play 6 games. That'd be if they are able to pull that off, that'd be a great a breaking point. But you've got the SMU game, and then you've got Navy and Miami back to back. Then you have a week open, and then you also have the final week of the season open. So there's 3 spots that now have to be filled. You've got SMU and then Syracuse, and then you've got a 12th game, whether that's Stanford, whether that's somebody else. We don't know the final answer to that yet, but you're going to fit at least one game in there on November 28th. I would prefer, like I said, to fit a game in there after the third. I actually wouldn't have a huge problem if it was October 10th that was a bye. I just know, like with Notre Dame's midterms coming up close there, that it would be nice to kind of have it closer to the end of October. So the schedule's getting closer and closer for us to kind of know what it's going to be. And I would imagine that we'll have an idea over the next week or two what the full schedule is going to look like. I know the ACC is dropping their full schedule within the next week. I think it's Monday. I think it's Monday. Might be today. Let me go find that out real quick. But when does the ACC release its 2026 football schedule? I just read this the other day that it was coming out soon. Monday, January 26th is supposedly when that's going to be. It's going to be aired on ACC Network, and they're going to release all the opponents. We'll probably know then. We'll know when SMU and Syracuse get fit then, and I would imagine the 12th team gets brought in at some point in time. Announced around then as well. It's just my guess. So we're at least one step closer, and I've actually already booked my flight to Provo. I went out and did that like 10 minutes after you got done writing the article.
Boom.
And I was thinking I was going to fly into Salt Lake City, but it's actually cheaper to fly into Provo. So got that knocked out, ready to do that one. Be my first trip out to Utah. Actually, I've never been to Utah. Certainly my first trip to BYU. So schedule's getting closer to being done. It's just kind of weird because it is a little bit challenging to make predictions and things like that when we don't even know who the 12th team is going to be. It's like they're going to go 12-0. Their schedule sucks. Who's the 12th opponent? They're playing at Ohio State, or at Georgia or something. Where it's like, well, okay, it's a little bit of a tougher schedule, Yeah. So we'll get a chance to talk about that and dive into those things. But so at least we have that. And then of course Notre Dame had a little bit of other news last night that was kind of buried by the Jason Onye news, and that is Notre Dame got a commitment, Trev, from Micah Drescher, a 2026 kicker who had already signed with Michigan, but he was released from his NLI, not to be confused with NIL, National Letter of Intent, because of all the drama going on at Michigan with their head coach being fired after signing day and things along those lines. So they did get Micah Drescher. So we'll just kind of quickly talk about that. First thing you notice when you pop on the film, Treb, is a big leg. He's got a very powerful leg.
Yeah, dude can absolutely kick the mess out of the football. He's like a 6'3", 198-pound kid. Definitely a bigger kicker than what's been on the roster in previous years. Mitch Jeter wasn't the biggest guy. Noah Burnett wasn't the biggest guy. But you can already tell, and I wrote this in the article, that there is a conservative effort in improving Notre Dame's kicking operation. And now with the absence of James Rundell, they're really just leaving all of this up to an open competition. And honestly, the special teams competition for punter, kickoff specialist, and place kicker arguably might be a top 5 battle in the offseason. Consider, last year it was always the quarterback battle and who's going to win the starting job. And now this year, giving all the drama around the kicking situation in South Bend last year, now it's who's going to be the place kicker. You have Eric Schmidt returning. You picked up Spencer Porath in the portal from Purdue. You have the Micah kid coming in the 26 class, and they also picked up a punter in the 2026 class as well, the kid from Australia. So there's going to be a lot of competition this offseason in Marty Biagi's room. Looking forward to that. But yeah, Brian, you hit the nail on the head. This kid absolutely has a leg on him.
No, he does. He does. And look, accuracy, leg drive. The only other thing I noticed, his approach is a little bit kind of delayed, which in high school is okay. He was ranked as, I think, like the first or second highest ranked kicker, according to Sailor Kicking. There's like the two scouting services that rank kickers. There's Sailor and Coles, and I think he was ranked number 1 or 2. Actually, I'm going to look that up while we're talking. He was ranked very high. I saw somebody say he was the number 1 kicker nationally by Chris Sailor Kicking. And so 247 ranked him number 12. And I'm going to go ahead and go with Chris Sailor's organization as opposed to 247 Sports on this one. But, obviously, look, here's the deal, Trev. Can this kid kick? I mean, he's got a strong leg. Eric Schmidt's got a strong leg. I think it was Vince that had said, and then you had read an article from a Michigan site that confirmed what Vince said on our board, which is like, I think this is what Vince said. This is what he told me anyway. This kid can punt and kick just like Eric Schmidt, but it's the opposite, where Eric Schmidt was a punter first that had to develop into a kicker. This kid's a kicker who also punts. And so you've got both of them that can do all 3 things. Micah Drescher, Eric Schmidt can all kick off, place kick, and punt. And then you have Jasper Scaife, who comes in, and he's just a punter. And all of them will have at least 3 years of eligibility left. Obviously, Eric Schmidt will have 3. And Micah Drescher has 4. Jasper Scaife has 4. And then even the transfer, Spencer Porath has 2 years of eligibility left. And he was also ranked as one of the top kickers in the country coming out. So you at least feel as though there is a much better opportunity for someone to emerge. If you can't get a good kicking situation this year, then you have no choice but to say Marty Biagi's the problem. Because, like, again, I think last year Biagi didn't do it. I think they didn't get the guys they wanted. They scrambled a little bit to take Noah Burnett. Didn't work out. Eric Schmidt was thrust into a situation he wasn't really prepared for. He wasn't expected to be a kicker day year one. The year before, like with Mitch Jeter, I keep saying that was a phenomenal pickup. It just didn't work out injury-wise during the regular season, but he was money at the beginning and money at the end. Spencer Schrader was kind of hit or miss. It was like the further back he was, the more accurate he seemed to be.
Right.
Oh, crap, he's kicking a 31-yarder. This is going to be – I don't know about this one. He's lining up for 55-yarder. Just add 3 to the board. It was the weirdest thing. But at this point in time, if you can't get this one right, then you're the problem. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to be like, look, they just had some bad luck from an injury standpoint. I think the coach Biagi needs to maybe take a step back like all coaches and say, okay, what can I do to make sure that we're really developing the mind of these young men and the mental approach to the game? Are we putting a little bit more on them at times maybe? And, mentally, and then figure it out. But like I said, I think Biagi gets a lot of criticism because the last 2 years of place kicking have been terrible. I don't think that I fault him for 24. It was bad luck. I do kind of fault him a little bit for 25 because of the roster composition. But what does he do? What does he do coming out of him doing not a good job in 25? He goes out and gets a top portal kicker who's a proven kicker who went 6 for 6 on kicks in Notre Dame Stadium this past year. He goes out and gets a punter with a great leg. You've got Eric Schmidt, who was considered one of the best kickers last year. And now you go out and get one of the best kickers in the country now. So, yeah, he didn't do a great job last year. But look what he's done. He's loaded the roster up with kids with big legs and talent. And, that's what you want coaches to do, right? Hey, look, last year wasn't a good situation. Let me make sure we're never in a situation again where if one kid goes down, we are going to have to turn to a walk-on who really isn't something that I can count on. We're going to go out and get legit legs, let them compete just like every other position on the team has to compete, and let the best man or men win depending on how – we could end up seeing 3 guys be – you have a PAT field goal guy is one kicker. You could have a kickoff guy as another, and then a punter be somebody else. That could end up being how it goes. But I like the fact that he went out and got aggressive in this offseason. Isn't that what we'd want from any other coach? Hey, man, your receiving core is not great. It was a bad year at receiving core. So we just say, well, this receiving coach sucks for the rest of eternity. Or do we say, hey, man, go out, fix it, figure it out? Well, that's what we want to do with Marty Biagi. Go figure it out. And, now it's his chance to say, look, you got some talented players. Now it's up to you to coach them up, just like you ask everybody else. So I actually like the approach. What are they doing? Getting as many talented players on the roster as they can, like they're doing everywhere else. And I'm good with that.
Absolutely. It's like what we talked about with other positions, Brian. The margin for error is now greater in the kicking room than it was the year before. Because even with Mitch Jeter, that's a really good point on him. And I know that some of the pushback with Biagi's job in 2024 was, how do you not have somebody behind him ready? It's like, look, you don't go out and get a portal kicker and expect him to miss half the season. That's just not. Now, do you prepare for it? Sure. But instead of going from, in 2024, a very proven, very accurate transfer portal kicker to a walk-on, 2 walk-ons arguably, to 2025 where you have another portal kicker, one that you weren't ideally looking to bring into a true freshman who wasn't really specializing in place kicking at the time, to now you load up and now your margin for error is if somebody gets hurt, if somebody doesn't work out, there's multiple options here. So you're exactly right. That's exactly what I would want any other coach to do. It is a prove it year, but you're putting yourself, Marty Biagi is putting himself in the right spot to go out and prove that they can get the kicking operation fixed. That's all we can ask for.
And it's imperative. And you don't talk about kicking until it's a problem. And has Marty Biagi been perfect? No, he hasn't. There's been some decisions he's made that I don't like. And you know who else that's true of? Like every other coach ever. Yeah, every coach makes mistakes. Every head coach makes mistakes. Every position coach makes mistakes. What you want to see is a coach that learns from those mistakes, right? And that's what I want to see from Marty Biagi. I didn't like how he handled James Rendell in 2024. The pooch punting and all that. Guess what they did in 2025? None of that, like ever. He went out and let him kick, and James Rendell emerges as one of the top punters in the country. Well, great evaluation by Marty Biagi to find him. And then, you correct some things. You thought this might work. It didn't really work. And then you make an adjustment. You go to something else. That's good coaching. You leave your roster in a bit of a pickle in 24 and 25. So what do you do in the offseason? You go out and fix it. You go out and get three talented kids and say, hey, we got to figure it out. We got to figure it out. So as long as they're all on the roster in 2026, I feel like they've put themselves in a position to where, this team has a chance to put a better operation, because you just can't go through another year like last year, Trev. The year before, I actually kind of understand, because, like you said, Mitch Jeter did get hurt, and you went to walk-ons, and they just weren't ready for the moment. But last year, there's no excuse for what we saw last year, none. I mean, absolutely no excuse for what we went through last year. You missed 4 extra points. Like, you had 3 different kickers miss an extra point. It's a bad look. It's a bad look. So you got to figure it out. And so he's throwing talent at the problem. You know what I mean? Like, let's throw as much talent as the problem as we can.
Yeah.
To where now you feel like you got a shot to figure it out.
Speaking of throwing talent on something, Brian, another addition and some big breaking news that happened that really got confirmed last night. Jason Onye was granted a 6 year of eligibility from the NCAA, which is just absolutely huge for Notre Dame's defensive tackle unit. Really big for the defensive line, big for the leadership on the team. And I'm excited to watch 47 back on the defensive line in 2026. Absolutely huge that he's coming back to South Bend.
It is. Honestly, Trevor, I wasn't overly optimistic that this was going to happen. It was one of those things where the NCAA has really been trying to crack down on just the absurd things being done for eligibility. The latest being some moron judge in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I'm sure that was an impartial jurist, announces that a kid that has signed 3 G League contracts, hasn't played college basketball in 2-3 years, has been a professional for 2 years, is now eligible to come back to Alabama. Now, there's like a 10-day window where he could maybe play 1 game against Tennessee before the next ruling. But this is all getting so dumb, and the NCAA is trying to kind of crack down on some of this stuff. It's all going to be determined by, judges and things like that. And Onye's, I lost faith in the Onye thing when they initially ruled Trinidad Chambliss out, because, he was claiming sort of a mental health issue that cost him basically a season, even though he played more than 4 games, which is very similar to Jason Onye's situation. But when you read the specifics of Trinidad Chambliss's situation and what the NCAA pushed back on, it gave me a little bit of hope, just a little bit. Somebody asked me last night, 1 out of 10, what were you thinking he was going to come back? I said, probably 3, maybe 4. But my little bit of hope came because they said, look, there was no, I'm paraphrasing from reading it, there was no like immediate documentation that he was suffering through the things he's now claiming he's suffering through. And the school he was at the time was not really at the time open, like saying it was the case. It's kind of retroactive stuff. Whereas Jason Onye being out for the issues he claimed that he missed 11 of 16 games over was documented at that time. He was going through something at that time, and it cost him a full season, and the NCAA granted him a 6th year. So I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think it's great for him, and I hope that he continues down the path that he's going down, getting his life in order, which he clearly has done, becoming a more effective player, which he started to do last season. I think it's great for Jason. It's great for the defensive line. And, it's amazing how the last couple weeks have gone, Trev. Absolutely amazing. I mean, we're sitting here, you and I having conversations about, man, this defensive tackle situation is not pleasant. Armel Mukama declared, Donnie Heinisch had just retired. You already lost Rubio. You already lost Dawson. We were thinking they were going to have Onye. You had dropped multiple balls on the beginning of the portal class, and you're thinking, man, this isn't going to be good. But you talk about what it means for Jason Onye, and that's a great opportunity. We'll dive even more into that. But just before we dive too much into the specifics of the rotation, how quickly this whole thing has changed. We just had all that, and then immediately, first ball that drops is Armel announces that he's coming back about a week and a half ago. I'm coming back. Great. 2 days later, I think it was 2 days later, Francis Brew commits. Huge. I think 2 days after that, Tion Gray announces he's coming to Notre Dame. And then now Jason Onye gets a 6th year. And then you're adding Tiki Hola, Elijah Golden, potentially Chris Burgess. What a difference a couple weeks makes when you talk about the fortunes of the Notre Dame defensive line. I'll be honest, Trevor and I were having conversations, and I was having conversations with other people like, this could be the kryptonite for this football team right now. If they don't find some, answers, and I don't know who those answers are because Francis Brew wasn't in the portal yet. Tion Gray wasn't in the portal yet. It was not looking good. And they had genuinely dropped some balls as a recruiting staff. This could be the thing that keeps Notre Dame from being a championship contender next year. And then 2 weeks later, bam, here we are.
Yeah, 2.5 weeks ago, it was looking pretty bleak. I mean, we were having conversations about it in shows. We were having conversations about it back line, and we were at a spot. It's like, I hope you could sign Xavier Gilliam. Don't drop the ball. Because at that point in time, 3 weeks ago, that was it. That was who was in the portal. You had the Mateen kid from Wake Forest, and that obviously fell through. The Xavier Gilliam thing was botched. And then it was like, okay, well, Elijah Hughes, giddy up. Davian Dixon, get right. All right, Sean Sevillano, let's see. I mean, you guys are going to be the defensive tackle rotation. And then to your point, first domino falls with Francis Brew. It's like, okay, there we go. Armel Mukam announces he comes back. And then we were talking about, hey, look, cherry on top is if you get Tion Gray. He has a body type unlike anybody in the current room. He's a bigger body, a run plugger. He can help out in run support, building on what was already a solid run defense from the year before. And then we would get mailbag questions or some buy-sell holds. How great would it be if Onye came back? It's like, yeah, great, but we're not betting the house on it. I mean, my confidence was at a 2 because it was hanging in the balance of the NCAA and that they come up with a fair ruling for a kid that deserved another shot and really has the opportunity to come back and complete a story arc. Marcus Freeman talks all the time about how everybody's story is different and how everybody's journey to greatness is different. And for Onye, it definitely is different than what, Riley Mills went through. It's different than what Boubacar went through and different from what Bryce Young is going to go through. So him coming back is absolutely huge for the room. It went from being the conversation shifted from, is this unit going to be good, to how good can they be now? And that's a really healthy spot for this room to be in. That's a really great spot for this defense to be. Oh, it's fantastic. And I'm happy for him that he's able to come back and finish it out strong.
It is funny how some of this stuff goes, Trev. It is, you talk about whether it's momentum or whether it's, just luck or just however it goes. Like the emotional roller coaster that was this offseason for Notre Dame has been wild.
January 21st.
Seriously, you think back to December when we're like, Notre Dame's going to get in. They deserve to be in. Here's the data. We broke it down, and then they don't get in. Then they announce they're not playing in a bowl game. And then like all the stuff that kind of happens in that month, the back and forth. Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? You're taking all these blows from a PR standpoint. You get the season, the postseason goes in a way you're like, gosh, this could be like the worst case scenario for Notre Dame, Indiana, and Miami are playing for the title. You get into the portal season. Obviously, Billy Schrouth goes pro, Emil Wagner goes pro, the running backs go pro, things that we expected. Obviously you're losing some good players. A bunch of young players that I really like jump in the portal. I understood them all. And then Josh Burnham leaves, and you're like, oh, this is not good. And then Armel Mukam leaves, and you're like, you got to be kidding me. And then Notre Dame honestly didn't do a great job at the beginning of the portal season. And we're sitting there, people are losing their minds. The chat's going crazy. We're like, hey guys, we're begging people to just let it play out, but privately we're like, dude, if this doesn't get fixed, this is going to be a problem, to now the last week and a half has been utter, just like perfection for Notre Dame. It's gone incredibly well. Mukam comes back. The D-tackle situation comes back. The 2 receivers they end up getting are better, more talented than the kid that people thought they were going to get at the beginning. You get a kicker. Keon Keeley's coming home. You know what I mean? And yes, home, because this is where Keon should have always been. This should have been home for Keon Keeley from day one. And you're just like, okay, as down as we were all feeling 2 weeks ago, now we're sitting here and we're having these conversations about, boy, this depth chart's pretty loaded now, Trev, in a position that a week and a half ago we were like, I don't know how this is going to be. All of a sudden it's a position where we look at and say they're pretty locked in now. And it's important, practically speaking, Trevor, it's very important that they were able to rectify this, because I believe this. I know you believe this. I know a lot of people in the chat believe this. But if you're not good up the middle on defense, you're not going to be an elite defense. And could Notre Dame have still been good? Yeah, they could have still been good. But it was going to take a lot of – you were going to have to hit the inside straight from a development standpoint. You were going to have to say, okay, well, hopefully Chris Burgess can break out. Hopefully Cole Mullins breaks out. Hopefully Elijah Hughes is better than I think he is. Hopefully Tion Gray, actually you weren't even thinking there. You didn't know who the D tackles in the portal were going to be. Hopefully Sevillano and Dixon, and now the freshmen are going to have to be ready to play. Maybe Brennan Vernon can figure it out. And now you're like, none of those guys are even in the two deep at this point in time going into the season. And you're in a much, much, much better situation to look. I mean, think about what we thought the depth chart would be, and then think about what it is now. I mean, this is the two deep now, or this is the depth chart now. And just keep in mind a couple things about this. Number one is D tackle and nose tackle. They would line up as D tackles and nose tackles. Jason Onye started the season playing nose, then he moved to kind of 3, and then his last 6 starts were at nose, starting with USC. But there's a lot of interchangeableness. There's snaps where him and Dawson are lined up, and Jason's at nose. He's in a 2-eye or a shade of the center. Jared Dawson's in a 3 technique, which is outside shade of the guard. And then on the very next play, and I showed these screenshots. There was back-to-back plays against USC where on one snap, Jason Onye's at the nose and Dawson's at the 3, and then the next snap, Jason Onye's at the 3 and Jared Dawson's in at the nose. And there was no motion. There was no shift. There was anything like that. And, if they do motion or shift, they'll just bump over. The nose goes to 3, and then the 3 comes down to nose and things like that. So there's an interchangeableness, which makes some of this somewhat moot. But I do think this is an idea of where things will start. And all of a sudden, this looks like a really impressive roster. And then you look at the bottom one. Everybody's always complaining, you got to get bigger, you got to get bigger, you got to get bigger. There you go. I mean, you're talking about where Jason Onye at 6'5", 302 is your smallest defense nose tackle right now. That's a much different looking depth chart than it has been in the past.
No, significantly. I mean, your lightest guy right now is Gordy Solstead, who still has the frame to be significantly bigger than 260. And I wouldn't be surprised if once the first, winter roster rolls out on the Notre Dame website, if he's significantly bigger than 260.
Yes, because this is from this past fall. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this is for everybody that's been complaining about the lack of size, and everybody talk, well, here it is, 6'5", 302, 6'6", 336, 6'3", 305, 6'2", 340. You're not going to go out to the portal and find more guys that are bigger than this.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not.
Yeah.
And this is an exceptional job by the Notre Dame defensive coaching staff, by the recruiting staff, of getting these guys in. And honestly, tip of the cap to the NCAA for doing the right thing and giving Jason Onye another year of eligibility. But this rotation is just absolutely deep. And it's a similar conversation to what it was last year, of that they can come at you in waves and they can come at you in waves. But I would argue that the talent of this defensive tackle rotation has more upside. There's more of a depth of talent here. And so they're going to be able to come at you in waves, but we're talking about a more talented unit. This is, man, I know we're going to sound like broken records here, Brian, but this graphic did not look like this on January 5th. I'll tell you that right now.
No, it did. I mean, think about this. On January 5th, your top 3 nose tackles were not on the roster. Were not expected to be on the roster. And your top D tackle was not expected to be on the roster. Was not on the roster. Yeah, it was a whole different deal. And you talk about waves, there's different skill sets here too. There's different strengths. There's these guys, this guy does this well, this guy does that well. And I think that brings a lot to the table. So, when you talk about the defensive tackle room, Trev, and how quickly things change, you went from it being a strength to it being to a major weakness to now I think this has a chance to be a strength.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is we've talked a lot about in recent months about how much better the Notre Dame run defense was this year. And it wasn't just better because they were blowing people out. Teams couldn't run. It wasn't better because, like they played teams that weren't good at running the football. They played plenty of teams that were good at running the football, including the number one rushing team in the country. And Notre Dame held them to about 80 some yards below their season average. And at the time, it was over 100 yards below their season average. But partly the reason why it's not 100 now is because of the Notre Dame game and what they did.
Yeah.
Of course, that being Navy, they held Navy to 206 yards, and Navy this season led the nation with 285 yards. You take the Notre Dame game out, and it's a much different deal. So they did some very good things, obviously, in that game. They played some other teams that ran the ball effectively. Arkansas was a top 30 rushing team. Texas A&M was a top 30 rushing team. USC at the time was a top rushing team. Part of the reason that they didn't finish as high as they did is because Notre Dame. USC still finished 21st in the country in yards per attempt this season, even though they finished, I think, in the 50s in total yards. And Notre Dame completely shut that run game down. Held them to 2.3 yards per carry and 68 yards. And that was the only time that they ran worse was against Oregon, where they had 52 yards and 1.9 yards per carry. And oh, by the way, Notre Dame just landed a guy from that team that was on that run defense. Now, he didn't play against USC, actually. If you go back and look at it, he missed a couple games, USC being one of them. But, he's coming from a place that expected him to be a factor in a really dominant run defense. And Francis Brew, we talked a lot about where Pitt was ranked from a rush defense standpoint. When they played Notre Dame, they finished the year ranked 8th in the country in rush defense. So the other D tackle you got comes from a defense that was even better statistically than the one that you had last year. So I think that there was a clear emphasis in this development of this room and who they went out and got in the portal and who they got from high school recruiting to say the D tackle's number one job is to stop the run, which I'm all about. But they don't sacrifice athleticism and playmaking ability, in my opinion, for that. Because Francis Brew can make plays. He had 20 pat pressures last season as a true sophomore. Jason Onye obviously had 15 pressures in the last 6 games of the season, which put him on pace to be very close to what Riley Mills did the year before in a pressure situation. I think Riley had 33 in the regular season the year before. Jason would have had 30 on that same, trajectory had he done in the first half what he did in the second half. And you're not, Armo Mukum has the athleticism. Cole Mullins can get after the quarterback. So you don't get Elijah Golden to just be a run stuffer. You know what I mean? That's not why you recruit Elijah Golden. You recruit him because he's going to be a playmaker. So when you look at it, you've added a lot of talent, a lot of depth, but you're adding guys that first and foremost are forces against the run. Tiki Hola can get after the quarterback for a kid his size, but the number one reason you're bringing in Tiki Hola, I was about to call him Freaky Hola, Tiki Hola is to stop the run. And I don't know where it came. It started like an F started. I don't know where that came from. But the primary reason you're going after Tiki Hola is what? His ability to shut down the run right up the middle as a 3 technique or as a nose. And that is a continuation of what Chris Ash wants to do, because any good coach says, this is what we want to do. Let's go recruit players that fit that. And this is Chris Ash's first full offseason of being able to do that. I think the main portal was closed when Chris Ash got hired last year. They had already gone to the portal for guys. They had already gotten guys before Chris Ash was hired. And this year was different. They were able to get guys that fit what they're trying to do. And I think that was smart. So the process was clunky. But at the end of the day, the guys you added and then getting Jason Onye back, you're now looking at this defensive tackle rotation saying this group is built perfectly for what Chris Ash wants to do with his defensive tackles, but you're not sacrificing playmaking ability in order to accomplish that, right? It's not 2-gapping run stuffers who can't move. Tion Gray's not Terrence Cody, who's a good player, but would not fit this style of play. That's not who he is. So it's been an outstanding offseason so far for what Notre Dame is trying to accomplish at defensive tackle. we'll have one big picture question to ask Trev, but just some final thoughts on just how this is all kind of changed and just what this defense looks like.
The level of talent in this room is spectacular. And for the now or never crowd that's out there, I want you to take a look at this graphic and look at the eligibility of players that remain in this room. There's only 2 guys that can't come back. That's not me saying that everybody outside of Elijah Hughes and Jason Onye will come back. That's me saying that for everybody that's painted this mental image in their head that, okay, like they're going to lose like 50 guys from this team after 2026. You got to do it now. Everybody else can come back, has the opportunity to come back outside of Elijah Hughes and Jason Onye. Picture that for a second. That is absolutely fantastic. Now, immediate implications of Onye's return, the line is now, you now have a solidified starter opposite of Francis Brew, because I'm also under the interpretation that Francis Brew was going to come in and start alongside whatever nose they were going to elect to go with, whether that be Tion Gray or Armel Mukam or whatever they do interchangeably. Now you have Francis Brew coming back with Jason Onye. And if you guys remember, once Gabe Rubio went down, your starting defensive tackle rotation last year, most of the time you had Jason Onye trotting out there with Jared Dawson.
Mm-hmm.
So at the top, you maintain the same, but now you just have loads of depth behind it. Loads of depth. And what that does for your younger talent, it gives them more time to develop. I was as excited as anybody to see what Elijah Golden and Tiki Hola would do. But we say it on this show all the time. You want your true freshmen and your younger players to get playing time because they earned it, not out of necessity. And at one point a couple weeks ago, we were talking about them playing out of necessity. It still would have been exciting, don't get me wrong. But when Notre Dame's going into the postseason, having to go up against an Ohio State offensive line that returns 4 of its 5 starters, an Indiana offensive line coached by Bob Bostad, a Georgia offensive line who's always big in the trenches, it makes you a little nervous, just a little bit, when you're relying on 2 true freshmen as a solid part of that rotation. But now it gives guys like Cole Mullins, Sean Sevillano, Davian Dixon, Tiki Hola, Elijah Golden, Gordy Solstead, Christopher Burgess, if he makes the switch, more time to develop. And it will be more of that earned conversation than necessity conversation. It's a very exciting spot to be in, man.
Yeah, if Tiki Hola and Elijah Golden are playing this year, it's because they've earned it and they're going to be dudes. And that's possible. Mm-hmm. But what it does is it slows down the need for them to play, which means it can be about development and getting them ready and teaching them the basics and teaching them the game and those type of things. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this is going to play out. Because to your point, Trev, there's 5 kids on this roster with freshman eligibility. And there's 3 other players with sophomore eligibility at D tackle. And so as long as you can keep them all here, it's a pretty good place to be. It's a pretty good place to be. So now it doesn't mean that everybody's going to come back except those 2 guys. It just means that you're in a position to where hopefully next year you're not in a situation where you've got to go to the portal and get 2 to 3 guys. Unless it's like, well, Francis Brew went to the NFL because he had, 50 tackles and 15 tackles for loss and 6 sacks and was an All-American for a national championship team. I'll gladly have to deal with that problem in 2027. You know what I mean? But even then, okay, then you've got Burgess who's going to groom behind him. You've got Cole Mullins who's got still 2 years left. You've got Armel Mukam, Tion Gray's got multiple years left. Sean Sevillano, Davion Dixon, Tiki Hola, old Gordy Solstead, Elijah Golden. Like there's plenty of talent there, and I'm a big fan of this depth chart now. But the problem was before you got Brew, Gray, and Onye back was you needed those young guys to play now. They had to play now. You were going to have to play, get Cole Mullins and Chris Burgess and Armel Mukam. We're going to have to play. Now they're going to play because they earn it. And that's always how it should be.
And what I want to see from Charlie Partridge is he prepares those guys, Cole Mullins and Gordy Solstead and Sean Sevillano and Davian Dixon and Tiki Hola and Elijah Golden. I want Charlie Partridge to come in and coach them like he has to get them ready because it's a necessity. That's going to be an exceptional.
You want coaches that coach the entire depth chart. It's one thing I used to praise Mike Elston for. It's something I praise Mike Mickens for a lot. It's something you want to see from coaches. I'm not saying they're the only guys that did that, but those are guys who I've praised more because they did it more noticeably than others. And I didn't get to see how Washington coaches much the last couple of years. So I don't want to say he didn't do that, What I know is Notre Dame kept having injuries the last 2 years, and every time they did, somebody else would step in the lineup and play well. Leads me to believe that he was prepping the whole roster, but now it's up to Charlie Partridge. So this isn't so much a shot at Al Washington, what we're saying. We're not saying that at all. You don't survive the injuries that Notre Dame did the last couple of years and then flourish on the D-line if you're not preparing the depth chart. But he's not there anymore. Now it's up to Charlie Partridge to do that and to take it to another level, and that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for. It's going to be fun to see. So let's ask this question, Trevor. How good, as we wrap this part of the show up, how good can this defensive tackle rotation be in 2026? That's the question. And I'll first kick it to you. And what needs to happen for them to play to their potential?
I mean, how good can they be? I mean, this outlook from the last 2.5, 3 weeks, they went from being just an okay, probably solid defensive line to interior of the defensive line to a championship caliber. And you have proven production coming back now. We've talked about it a lot, especially since they've came out already. FanDuel has Notre Dame tied for second best odds to win the national title this year, tied with Indiana and right behind Ohio State. You're not going to be able to do that unless you're solid up the middle. Just not. And they're solid up the middle at the second and third level of the defense, but it's not going to do you a whole lot of good if, you don't get to prove how solid and how stout you are up the middle of your defense if you don't get the opportunity to do that until running backs, receivers are 8-9 yards down the field. So what this does is it raises the ceiling to now this is a championship caliber group, and we have the conversation of it transitions from will they be good to how good can they be? And based on just the roster makeup, I believe that this could be a championship. Now, what do they have to do to get there? They have to maintain their identity as good run stoppers. You have the personnel to do that. More of an interior pass rush in comparison to what you had last year. Now, some of that's going to be how much does Charlie Partridge continue to develop some of the younger guys? I'm as excited as the next person that Armel Mukam is returning to this roster. But that doesn't mean that he's a finished product. He also still has to continue on his journey of developing into becoming a premier interior defensive lineman at Notre Dame. Why do you need that young talent to develop? Because you're not going to ask Jason Onye to play 100 snaps a game, 80 snaps a game, call it. You're not going to want to be in a position where you have to ask Francis Brew to come in and play 65, 70 snaps a game. So continue developing the younger talent, remain stout in the run game, and then add to your pass rush arsenal. Because based on the makeup of this roster, you have an answer for whatever offensive line you're going to face in the regular season and in the postseason. And that's what makes me excited about this group, Brian. That's how good I think they can be.
I love that statement. It's no longer, what'd you say? It's no longer about would they be good, but how good they will be. Yeah, I dig that. That's a great way of saying it because we were having that conversation 2 weeks ago. He said the offseason is going to have to be good for them at D-tackle. They're going to need to add some guys. They're going to need some young guys to just step up, and they've done some of those things so far. So this is certainly the deepest defensive tackle room they've had in forever. I think back to the 2017 season when Mike Elko was trying to rebuild what was the loose emoji told me this, so it's true. If Lou said it, if Lou gave you a stat or a historical nugget about Notre Dame football, you know it's true. He said the 3 years of Brian Van Gorder, 14 to 16, was the worst 3-year stretch of run defense in Notre Dame history. And they were giving up a ton of yards. That's what Mike Elko was having to rebuild. And I remember that 2017 season. You had like John Bonner, and you had, I think Daniel Cage was still on the team. Jerry Tillery was going into his junior year. But you had some injuries. You had some bad recruiting to where like Myron Tungavaloa-Amosa and Kurt Heinisch as true freshmen had to play that year. Had to play. And now you're looking at a depth chart where Elijah Golden, who was a first-team All-American who had, what was it? It was something like 60-plus tackles for loss and almost 30 sacks in the last years of high school. First-team All-American on Rivals and Max Preps, is 7th on the depth chart going into going into spring practice. And I'm not saying like, he'd quickly pass up this guy. That's not the point. The point is there's 7 guys at D tackle. And I don't mean D tackle as I'm talking when I'm separating D tackle and nose, 3 technique. He's the 7th guy at 3 technique. Tiki Hola, who I loved Myron Tungavaloa-Amosa. I think Tiki's a better prospect coming out of high school than Myron was. Myron had to play as a freshman, and I'm looking at the depth chart, and Tiki Hole is 6th at nose because of how deep this roster is. So and it's not deep of, like, I know a lot of fans aren't fired up about Gordy Solstead. I loved Gordy Solstead's upside and potential. We always knew he was going to need time. And he made his presence felt as a freshman as well once he finally got healthy. Chris Burgess is a guy that the staff is incredibly high on. I have him listed at 275 on this depth chart because that's what he's listed on the roster. But I've been told he's over 290 already. There's a lot of talent here. A lot of talent here. So it has a chance to be an elite defensive tackle group. They've got to prove it. It's not elite today. It's not elite based on what these guys have done in the past. If you put them all together and say they repeat what they did last year, if everybody at the defensive tackle room does what they did last year, that's a really good D tackle room. For them to become elite, you need the two. Again, Brew and Gray were sophomores last year. Elijah Hughes was a junior last year who was playing really his first true meaningful snaps. I mean, he stepped in for some injuries at USC, but it was a pretty young group. And the two guys you got out of the portal either are in the same grade or younger than Armo Mukum. I mean, so you've got a chance if there's some just typical junior to sophomore to junior to senior improvement to where this group could be good. And with Jason Onye, I don't need Jason Onye to get announced better than he was the final 6 games. I just need him to play consistently like he did the final 6 games. Because that's difference maker ability. And we saw that down the stretch. And it wasn't just against the bad teams. He was excellent against USC. He was very good against Navy. And then when he played against the worst teams, he kind of dominated in the snaps he played, which is what you want to see. So it's a very good D tackle room based on what we know of just what guys have already done. If we see some growth at all from anybody, it's going to become one of the 5 best D tackle rooms in college football, which is exciting because we've already mentioned that we think the D end room might be the best in returning group in college football. I mean, it's certainly top 5 to 10 already, just of what we know. And then you add Keon. What kind of jump does Bryce Young make? Whew, boy, it starts getting exciting, man, about what this defensive line can be. As long as Chris Ash lets them loose, baby, that's kind of where we're, It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this group. It's got loads of potential, man. Loads of potential to be a truly dominating unit, which, Trev, when we kicked off our offseason stuff, what did we say was the key to this team? The number one key to this team from a football standpoint beyond good luck and buy-in. What was the first thing we said? You got to dominate in the trenches. I watched the championship game, and I'm like, these are 2 teams playing their butts off in the trenches. And Indiana was better, and they were coached better. If Notre Dame wants to do that, and I watched the championship game last year, 2024, and I watched Ohio State beat Notre Dame in the trenches out after the first drive. Best drive the game Notre Dame had was what? A drive where they just came and punched Ohio State in the mouth. Problem is, Ohio State counterpunched, and Notre Dame never counterpunched back until it was too late, right? But I watched Ohio State beat Notre Dame in the trenches, run on Notre Dame, protect the quarterback against Notre Dame, get after Notre Dame's quarterback, shut down Notre Dame's run game, and that was the difference. So you're now putting a defensive line together that has a chance to be that type of group. And I don't know how you're not fired up about that.
Gets me fired up, and I cannot wait until spring where we can see some of these big boys live and in person, man. I'm excited. But, folks, that's going to do it for part 1 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to preview the 2026 offense. But before we get there, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame, college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.
Before we dive into part 2 of the show, I just want to make a little comment here about Curt Cignetti, because I know a lot of Notre Dame fans like to give Curt Cignetti a hard time. They like to get after him, talk a little trash. He's this, he's that, and I understand that. I just want to remind you guys of something, okay? They released today the final votes of the coaches poll and where the coaches voted. And I just want to let you guys know that the coach who had Notre Dame ranked the highest in the coaches poll was not Marcus Freeman. It was Kurt Cignetti. Chuck Martin also had Notre Dame ranked higher than Marcus Freeman had Notre Dame ranked, who he had them 9. I have lost all respect for Jim Mora, who ranked Notre Dame 25th in the ranking. But I just want to throw that out there for people that like to give Kurt Cignetti a hard time. Jared Parker had Notre Dame 9th as well. He had him in there, but no coach had Notre Dame ranked higher in the postseason coaches top 25 than did Kurt Cignetti, who had Notre Dame 7th in his final rankings. So I just thought I'd point that out. Lance Taylor had him 9 too. All the former Notre Dame coaches had him in the top 10. So even Kurt Cignetti ranked Notre Dame higher, even higher than Marcus Freeman ranked Notre Dame. So I just want to throw that out there. So some of those rankings were like, okay, that's embarrassing for your coach and your SID. But I just want to say that, for everybody that likes to bust his chops, nobody had Notre Dame ranked higher than Kurt Cignetti did in the final polls. So there you go.
Getting into part 2 of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We're going to be previewing the 2026 offensive side of the ball. And to the surprise of nobody, the gentlemen on this side of the screen are going to be starting everything off with the offensive side of the ball. 2 offensive guys sitting here. But, Brian, I've been so much looking forward to this conversation, especially with everything that's gone on in this past offseason. We've been wanting to turn the page since what? December 8th? But we knew that we couldn't.
5 minutes after the ranking, after I got over the rankings, like, wow, what just happened? Okay, let's talk. Well, actually, it would be after the bowl. They said they're not going to play in the bowl. It's like, well, guess we can start getting ready for the 2026 season here on the first freaking weekend of December. This is going to be fun. Thanks, guys. Ugh.
Oh, I know it, man. But we've been wanting to turn the page just like you guys have for quite some time. But now that the portal is officially done in terms of departures, the team is who they're going to be right now, with the exception of maybe some later depth adds in the portal. We can finally take a look at what this 2026 offense is going to look like. But before we can completely do that, we're going to give ourselves a baseline and a foundation and look at how the 2025 offense finished. That's going to give us a good gauge for what we believe that they can do moving forward. And Brian, let me tell you, it's exciting.
It is. I mean, look, Trev, when you talk about this unit, I still believe, even today, that defense gets you to the show and offense wins a championship. Like, how can you say that after the last 2? I back my point. Who had the better offense all year between Indiana and Miami? Indiana did. Who had the better offense in the postseason, Notre Dame or Ohio State? As good as Notre Dame defense was, they had to score points to win that game, and they couldn't score points to win that game. I mean, Indiana. I mean, think about this. Ole Miss won their first 2 playoff games where scoring the same amount of points they scored against Indiana would have won in the game by double figures in the first game, by 18 in the first game, and would have won the second game by a touchdown. If they'd have scored the same exact point. Now, the last 2 games, semifinals and championship, guess what? Your defense couldn't shut those caliber teams down. Not that your defense isn't good, but when you get to that level, teams are going to score in the 20s and sometimes 30s on you. And, you just gave up 27 points to Ole Miss, and you gave up 27 points to Indiana. Ole Miss didn't have a good enough defense to shut down Miami. Indiana did. So you still needed your offense to be able to go out there and make those plays in those big moments. And so that's what Notre Dame's offense needs to be in 2026. And, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go over the rankings and just kind of quickly talk about what was lost to understand what then returns and what the expectations are for 26. So this will be sort of a big picture look at the offense. And then as we kind of get into the offseason, we'll do like position group breakdowns. We'll do run game breakdowns, pass game breakdowns. We're January 21st. The first game is until September 6th. We got a lot to cover. So we're not going to get it all covered in this show, but I do think this is a good time to have a bit of a, okay, where are they right now as we go into the offseason? Where are they coming from and where do they need to go? And where we'll start, Trev, is looking at Notre Dame's rankings from last season offensively. And we've talked a lot about this. Notre Dame set a school record in points per game, a modern school record, a record that has not been the last time Notre Dame topped it was back in 1912. They broke the previous modern record in yards per play. That was also set by Mike Denbrock offense back in 2015, an offense that had Deshaun Kaiser, Will Fuller, CJ Prosise, Quentin Nelson, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey. You had Nick Martin on that 2015 team, Steve Elmer. You had Chris Brown, Amir Carlisle, Josh Adams, Dexter Way. It was a loaded offensive football team, and this team shattered that team's yards per play record. Shattered it. CJ Carr set a program record in passer rating by a lot. You know, I mean, he didn't just break the record that Jimmy Clausen and Bob Williams had. He blew it away. And you know, so you see a lot of improvement from the offense, Trev, and it was a balanced offense. It was an offense that was among the nation's most explosive offenses. I've heard people say, well, you know, I mean, you had defensive touchdowns and you had offensive touchdowns. You know, if you look at Trevor, you and I talked about this. If you look at Notre Dame finished the year with, what was it, 504 points? Is that what we were talking about the other day, right? It's 504 points. If they only scored 49 against Syracuse, they're still a team that averages, actually, hold on a second. So 504 minus 70 plus 49 equals, and you're still an offense that's scoring 40.3 points per game, even if you don't count that. And we assume that Notre Dame's the only team in the country that had defensive and special teams touchdowns, right? This is still an offense that on its own merits basically scored 40 points a game. And how many times have we seen Notre Dame not do much in the fourth quarter because they had a huge lead on somebody? I mean, they scored 49 points in the first half. Was it 42 points? And they scored over 40 points by halftime of two games against Power 4 teams this year. You know what I mean? So it was an elite offense in a lot of ways that I still think needs to show that it needs to be better in the biggest moments. You know, it needed to be better against USC to play to your full potential. It needed to be better against Miami. It's pretty good against Texas A&M, except for one. You know, I'd say one turnover was a problem. Your short yardage stuff wasn't great. You certainly can improve on that, but by and large, Trev, this is the best offense that statistically that Notre Dame has had of my lifetime. That's what we watched this year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and plus, to your point about, 42 points per game, that was also with them only scoring 28 against Boise. That was with them only scoring 25 against Boston College. You know, a lot of missed opportunities. But the biggest thing that sticks out to me when I look at these numbers as a whole is this was a wildly efficient, explosive offense. You go and you look, they ranked 124th in the country in plays per game. They're at 63.3 points per game, but they ranked second in points per game.
And that's why I put that in there. I wanted to show, like, part of the reason the yards are 12th is because they only ran 63 plays per game, which is 124.
It's absolutely insane. I mean, and you can keep going down the list. They ranked 63rd in the country in rushing attempts per game, but 17th in the country in rushing yards and 5th in the country in rushing touchdowns, even in an area that you and I have both been pounding our fists on the table saying that they have to get better at, is red zone offense. Red zone touchdown efficiency, they were 21st in the country. So there are still areas that they have to improve on. There are still areas that they have to cut back on. But look, man, we're talking about an offense that was wildly efficient. They had 40 plays in 12 games of 30 yards or longer. That ranked 5th in the country. I would expect that number to have gone up if they played in the postseason, especially in the first round, especially if they would have played a team like an Alabama, especially if they would have played a team like, so this was a wildly efficient and explosive offense. And where I get excited, Brian, is they're not done. There's still another level for them to reach. Our point of bringing up this graphic isn't enjoy it, folks. Don't know if you're going to see that next year. It's hey, this is where their starting point is. And the fact that this was a record-setting offense in certain aspects, in 2025, and there's still areas that they have another level to reach.
Yeah.
Boy, if that doesn't get you excited about this team, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I mean, and we saw growth, right? I mean, the year before, Notre Dame has been a big play offense since Mike Denbrock got here. You know, when you go back and look at like 2023, Notre Dame ranked 29th in plays of 30 yards or more. We broke down that season how a lot of that was because they ripped off a lot of big plays against like Central Michigan and NC State and, you know, Navy and teams that weren't very good. And they didn't do it at all against Ohio State and Duke and Louisville and Clemson and teams like that. But then in 2024, Notre Dame jumps up to 17th in plays of 30 yards or more. And then 2025, they jump up to 5th. They had 6 more plays of 30 yards or more this year in 12 games than they had last year in 16 games. But they didn't really make any jump at all in rushing. I mean, as far as like total number, they had 18 rushes of 30 yards or more in 2024. And in 2025, they ranked 4th. They ranked 4th again this year at 16. So they were actually more explosive on a per game basis on rushing yards, big plays this year than they were even last year. The big difference was the pass game. That's where you saw the biggest jump. In 2024, Notre Dame ranked 76th in college football in passing plays of 30 yards or more. They had 16. This year, and that was in 16 games. That was 1 per game. This year, in only 12 games, they ranked 20th in passing plays of 30 yards or more. They had 24. They doubled it in 4 fewer games. That's where the jump came from this year. Like, there wasn't much of a change in rushing success this season, Trev. If you go back and like look at Notre Dame's numbers, you know, kind of where they were as a football team in 2024, they averaged 209.9 yards per game rushing. This year, they were at 203.4. That's a little misleading because they didn't run the ball as well in the 4-game playoff games that they played in. So they were actually better in the regular season last year, but not by a ton. You know, last year they were at 5.66 yards per play. This year, they were at 5.69 yards per play. Jeremiah Love last year averaged 6.9 yards per carry. This year he was at 6.89. Jadarian Price went from 6.2 down to 6.0. They were about the same. Now, again, that was without playing in the playoffs, which might have, you know, dropped them a little bit. But the point is that the pass game improvement was really where the big jump came from. And it was the presence of CJ Carr. It was the arrival of Malachi Fields, the continued growth, Jordan Faison being healthy. You know, but you got Faison back, but then you lost Greathouse for most of the season. So, that's the thing you look at, Trev, is this offense has taken a giant leap in the 2 years since Mike Denbrock arrived. And here's a stat. You see these numbers, right? But this graph right here, these are all the areas where Notre Dame ranked in the top 10 in college football and statistically. And in none of those categories are they 10th. And in, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, they rank in the top 5. And they're not meaningless statistics. It's points per game. They're second. Yards per play, they're second. Most plays of 30 yards or more, they're 5th. Rushing yards per attempt, they're 3rd. Rushing touchdowns, they're 5th. Yards per pass attempt, they're 2nd. Passer rating, they're 4th. Points per play, they're number 1. You know, so those are all things you look at and say, this team is pretty good. They were 13th in third down offense, which is an improvement from where they were a year ago. So there were a lot of things this year offensively, and this is honestly why we wanted to see Notre Dame in the playoff. I mean, they scored 34 points on USC and didn't even play well offensively. Missed a field goal, threw a touchdown, an interception inside the 10. Like, that game should have been 40-something to 24, and not even competitive in the 3rd and 4th quarter. So I look at it, Trev, and say just what the expectations are have to be focused on what they were last year. Now you go into year 3 of the Mike Denbrock offense. You're going to have your first time in Marcus Freeman's 5 years. This is the first time he's going to have the same quarterback for a 2nd straight year. First time. You know, last time that happened was back in 2020 when Ian Book went into his 2nd full year as a starter. 2nd and a half total, but 2nd full year as a starter. That's where the kind of the foundation comes from. Like, you were already elite. Now the expectation is built on it, despite the fact, Trev, you've got some losses. You're losing Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. You're losing Malachi Fields and Eli Raridan and Will Pauling. You're losing Billy Schrouth and Emil Wagner. So it's not going to be easy. They're going to have to earn it. But I think when you talk about what this offense should be in 2026, I expect it to maintain this level of dominance, but to do it maybe a little bit more consistently.
What almost leaves me more excited than the highlighted areas here, Brian, are the areas that aren't highlighted. A lot of times, you and I, each week, we sit down and break down Notre Dame's opponents. And we pull up graphics that look almost just like this, that cover the same stats for teams that Notre Dame is facing on offense and defense. And we'll come across teams that's like, yo, this team ranks 5th in the country right now in passing, but they rank 97th in rush yards per game. You know, I look at some of these other stats, and it's not like if it doesn't rank in the top 10, they rank outside of the top 50. I look at some of these, it's like, yeah, sure, they don't have a top 10 rushing offense in the country in terms of yards per game, but they're 17th. They don't have a top 10 offense in tackles for loss allowed, but they're 28th. I look at things like passing touchdowns. Yeah, 38th. Could it have been higher? Yeah. If they would have made the postseason, I absolutely think it would have been higher. Notre Dame would have been top 20 in the country in passing touchdowns this upcoming season if all CJ Carr did, if all he did was throw 4 more touchdowns. That's it. In an entire postseason run. I'm pretty confident after watching him play, he would have gotten there. So those are kind of the areas that we talk about, how there's still room to get better. Do I know if Notre Dame is going to be number 2 in the country next year in points per game? I have no idea. But now we know what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to be number 2 in yards per play next year? I'm not sure. They could be first, they could be second, or they could be fourth. But now we know what this unit is absolutely capable of. And that just makes you really excited for what's coming down the pike with them. Really excited.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is not a new thing for Mike Denbrock either. And that's kind of part of the reason there's a level of excitement is this isn't new for Mike Denbrock. I mean, Mike Denbrock's offense this past season ranked 2nd in yards per play, 7.32. His offense last year wasn't as good, but they still ranked 27th despite being a ground and pound team. They were 27th in yards per play. But his 23 offense ranked number 1 in college football in yards per play. So in the last 3 years, Mike Denbrock's offense has never ranked lower than 28th in yards per play and is ranked 1st or 2nd 2 out of the last 3 years. And then, of course, as we've talked about, you know, in the past, his Notre Dame offense, obviously in 2015 was elite. His Cincinnati offense in 2021 ranked 9th in college football in yards per play. His 2020 Cincinnati offense ranked 16th in yards per play. So these are not new things for Mike Denbrock. This has always been something his offenses have done. They've always been offenses that were elite. And in his first year at Cincinnati, I'll let you know, they were 99th in yards per play, 99th. And by his 3rd and 4th years, they were top 10. And the year before he got there, they were 99th. And as I mentioned, Notre Dame, I believe they were 4th in 2015. I'd have to go back and look. I think they were 4th. So the point is, this isn't new. And I know that he is a coach that gets a lot of criticism. I don't understand why, from the standpoint of every coach deserves criticism. Mike Denbrock has called bad games before. He'll tell you that. It's more so that there's a feeling amongst some that, like, he's just kind of an okay coordinator. Like, I think that's kind of crazy. And I think you don't get these kind of numbers by accident. And it's not just because he had Jeremiah Love. Okay. Well, he had Jaden Daniels. Okay. Well, so maybe the guy knows what he's doing, like from let's go out and find the right quarterback in the portal. You know, let's go out and find, let's build our offense around this guy. You know, who was it that recruited Will Fuller to Notre Dame? It was Mike Denbrock. You know what I mean? So it's like, guy knows what he's doing. And now it's up to him to be tasked of, okay, it statistically looks great, but would you consider last year's offense to have been elite from start to finish? I don't.
No.
I think it ended that way, but they needed it to be that way in a couple other games, and it wasn't. And that's going to be that next step. And which means that's the level of success you need to have when you get to the postseason. You need to look like Ohio State's offense looked last year in the playoffs. That's where I expect it to be. You need to look like what Indiana's offense looked like this year in the playoffs. That's where I expect this offense to be last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, Brian, you've already touched on it. Kind of transitioning here to our next point of what this offense lost. And look, every single team, every single year is going to suffer at least one impactful loss. The next team in college football to go through an entire offseason with 0 impactful losses will be the first team in college football history to go through an entire offseason without an impactful loss. And you touched on some of those guys. Out of the running back room, you're losing Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. You're losing guys like Malachi Fields and Will Pauling and Eli Raridan. And then the offensive line, you're losing 2 captains. So that is a big piece of things that they're going to have to replace. But what leaves you excited is what's coming up, what's returning. But it's not going to just be easy to replace a guy like a Malachi Fields because you just got Quincy Porter out of the portal.
Correct. Because Malachi had been for 2 years. I mean, Malachi had games that were better than what Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter have done for their careers so far.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't even get into the fact you've got to replace your best running back duo since 1992 when you had a guy named Jerome Bettis and Reggie Brooks playing together. But that's what good teams do, right? That's what great coaches do. That's what they're expected to do.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. You're talking about players that played a major factor into them having all of these categories ranked inside of the top 10. But you go through and you look at what's returning, Brian, and that gives you a lot of faith in their ability to replace some of these guys. It really does.
So what does that look like, Trev? Does that mean, okay, well, if Notre Dame's going to repeat this success, they need Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, Nolan James, Javion Osborne, and Jonas Walton to repeat the performance of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price? And if they're going to have this level of success, that means they're going to need Quincy Porter or Micah Gilbert or Cam Williams or Caden Finley, whoever's going to be that boundary guy, to repeat the performance that Malachi Fields had statistically and then making the kind of catches he made. Is that what we're asking? No, that's not what we're asking. Because offenses evolve as your personnel changes. Last year, you were a team that built your offense around the running backs because you weren't going to build it around your redshirt freshman quarterback the same way you will build it around your redshirt sophomore quarterback who now has 12 starts under his belt. Last year, you might have early on in the season, the focus of the offense was Malachi Fields. Team started to play that. This year, the focus of the offense is going to be more Jordan Faison. It's going to be more Jaden Greathouse. It's going to be more, the running backs out of the backfield potentially. There's an evolution of where Notre Dame's offense is going to go. What's the offensive line going to look like? So it's not about, okay, you plug and play these 2 guys, run the exact same offense, and then expect those guys to match the level of production from the guys they lost. That's not how it works. It's about a shift and an evolution. So now you talk about, now you build around CJ Carr. Now you build around Jordan Faison. Now you're going to build your offensive line around Anthony Knapp and Gerby Lambert and fitting them in where they best fit and where they can best be part of an elite offensive line. So there's a lot of things. You've got some injury question marks that are going to have a big impact on how good this team is going to be this year, Trev. What's Jaden Greathouse look like? Where's Ashton Craig at? When will he be back? Will he be healthy? And then I think the biggest injury question mark of all is, will you have Charles Jackasaw? And until Notre Dame tells us yay or nay, we don't know the answer to that. We know all the rumors that you guys hear. We hear all that stuff too. But until Notre Dame tells us what's going on, we don't know. So there are a lot of questions, Trev, about, can the evolution of the offense provide the same result? Can an offense built around CJ Carr, not Jeremiah Love, have the same level of effect that last year's offense did? Can the return of Jaden Greathouse negate the loss of Malachi Fields? Because I'm not going to ask Quincy Porter. I'm going to ask Quincy Porter to kind of somewhat replace the production that Will Pauling had. I want Jaden Greathouse to replace the production that Malachi Fields had. It'll look different, but those are the questions that we have, and we don't know how those are going to go, but those are going to go a long way. Those players and that evolution is going to go a long way towards determining whether or not this offense can remain the elite group that Notre Dame needs it to be.
Well, and that's the overall key, right? I mean, it's going to look different, and that's okay. Notre Dame is absolutely capable of averaging 7.2 yards per play and almost, 6 yards per carry a rush as a team. But it's instead of it being Jadarian Price hitting a back cut on split flow zone and taking it 60 yards to the house, Maybe you're doing it by just downhill run game, gashing him 8, 5, 6, 11, and then Aeneas or Kedron have the opportunity to break a big one. But fact of the matter is you're building your offense around a guy like CJ Carr, who FanDuel has right now tied for Heisman odds. The odds continue to shift and they continue to move. One day he's the clear-cut favorite. Other days he's tied with Arch Manning. But fact of the matter is, it's going to look different. It is. Maybe your jump ball one-on-one guy.
He's not going to drop the 13th next week.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, it's the personnel of the offensive line is going to look different. The standard won't change. The expectations around them won't change, but it'll look a little bit different. The expectation and the standards of the tight end room aren't going to change, but it's going to look a little bit different. I don't know if you have a guy that is as ready as what Eli Raridan was to step up into that number 1 slot in 2025. You have players that have that potential, but there's some things that they have to work on in the offseason to do it. But they're more than capable of repeating their points per game performance, yards per play, yards per attempt, completion percentage, and then there's areas that they have to get better. But it's the returners, Brian, that just really, really make you excited for what this thing can be, compounded with some of the returners that that you have coming back. It's just,
right.
Oh, it's exciting.
Well, and that's football, right? I mean, Notre Dame goes 11-2 in 2019. They lose a stud receiver in Chase Claypool. He's gone. You look at the 2020 team and you're like, I didn't think Chris Fink was done after 2019 as well. He had been a very important part of what you're trying to do. You lose Tony Jones Jr., starting running back. Your projected starting running back had 4 carries the year before. You're like, well, what's this going to look like? And it looked very different in 2020. But the end result was your team was better, right? I mean, that's the thing. So Javon McKinley steps up. I think he had like 1 career catch going into his last year. That was a little bit more than that. But like he didn't have a ton of production going into his last year. And he steps up and he's their best receiver. You get Ben Skoranek out of the portal and he has a strong year. I mean, your freshman Michael Mayer comes in and steps out. You have a breakout season from Kyron Williams, who comes out of nowhere and has a 1,000-yard season. Your offensive line becomes a better strength of your team that year than it was the year before. And Ian Book has a very different type of statistical season in 2020 than he had in 2019. Your team evolved. And so we saw it in 2023 going into 2024. How are you going to replace Audric Estime? I mean, yeah, Love and Price have talent, but they got to show it. And then lo and behold, they were even better as a duo than what he was as him and Love were as a 1-2 punch in 2023. And so like that's football, man. I mean, that's you lose Mitchell Evans, Eli Raridan's got to step in and do his thing, and he did. And that's where you're at. I mean, you lose Riley Leonard, who was the heart and soul of your team in 2024. And CJ Carr's got to step in. The offense looks different under CJ, but it's more explosive, it's more productive, and it's even better. That's football. And the best teams are able to do those things year after year. Indiana goes 11-1 last year in the regular season. They lose Curtis Rourke. They lose their top 2 running backs. They lose players from their offensive line. They lose players from their defense, and they just reload. I mean, they're doing it. That's what the expectation will be for Notre Dame. Is it will be up to who's going to step up at running back. We know who we think it's going to be, but now we need to see it. Can Jaden Greathouse be the guy all season that we think he can be? Or is he just a guy that kind of got hot for a couple games as everybody was trying to do something else? That's what we're going to find out this year. And so can Jordan Faison still be successful when teams are maybe focusing on him a little bit more than they were last year, where they were focusing on, I mean, no disrespect to Jordan Faison, but he wasn't in my top 3 of things I was worried about going into a game last year. I was more concerned about Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Malachi Fields, Eli Raridan. It's like, I'm going to take my chance with Jordan Faison. And then what did he do? He made teams pay for that. He was a really good football player. But the point is, how's he going to evolve? And that's what is so much fun about this sport, to be honest with you, is like watching the evolution of football teams from year to year and how they change and who steps up and who doesn't step up and who's going to be that guy that is the breakout star at this position or that position. And that's what I'm looking forward to. But I'll say this as we transition to kind of what the expectations are, Trev, which will, kind of break this segment into 2. But the thing for me is the Denbrock's got to do his thing, and Rudolph's got to do his thing, and Mike Brown's got to do his thing. But the big thing I'm curious to see evolve this season is who steps up as the leaders of this offense. Does CJ Carr, does he have it in him? And I think he does, but it's a question until it's proven. Can he be, like, we know he showed leadership last year, but can he be the face of the football team for an entire offseason? He wasn't last year because we didn't know who was going to be the starter last year. I mean, we thought we knew who we thought it was going to be, but he wasn't the face of the program last year because Kenny was there and Steve was still there through spring, and then it was him and Kenny. And it wasn't for 2 weeks before the opener that he kind of became the face of the program, of the offense, and that was even still like, what's your number one job? Get the ball to 4. I mean, that's still your top priority is get the ball to 4. Now he's got to step up and show that. I think part of the thing I'm so high on CJ Carr and always have been is because I think he has those intangibles, but now it's about showing it. I think Aeneas Williams can be a very good football player. I think Kedron Young can be a stud. I think Nolan James can be a factor. Now they got to show it. I think Jaden Greathouse can be a dude for an entire season. I think. I don't know. You know what I mean? I think the offensive line can be elite. I don't know because we haven't seen an elite offensive line since 2020. We haven't seen one from this coach. He's had some good lines. They've never been bad. They've had stretches where they were bad. 2023, they had some stretches, but like they also had some stretches where they were good. And but it's never been elite. Now we need to find out if they can do that. And that's going to ultimately determine. We're going to talk about other things, but that ultimately right there, the player stepping up and putting in the work and showing the leadership and having that desire to be great. Look, Cam Williams got all the talent in the world, and yes, Mike Brown needs to do a better job of developing him. But at the end of the day, Cam Brown's going to be great, or Cam Williams is going to be great if Cam Williams wants to be great and is willing to do the work to be great. Yeah. And that's true for every player in this roster. Quincy Porter could be a dude for Notre Dame this year. Mylan Graham could be a dude for Notre Dame this year if they want to be. And wanting to be is not a feeling, it's an action. Because no, like you say, well, I want to be great. No, you don't. Yes, I do. I'm telling you I do. No, you don't, because I watch how you work, and you don't work like someone needs to be great. That's truly deep down. Everybody says it. Yes, I want to be the best I can be. But the people that truly want it are the ones that put the work in. And how that leadership evolves to drag, to pull everyone with you. You need, I say this all the time, you need elevators. And what are elevators on a football team? Guys that bring everybody up. I'm going up, you're coming up with me. Well, I don't want to. Well, I'm going to be at your door every day when I'm about to go work out, making sure you come out and work out with me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you need. And the more of those you have, the better you're going to be as a football team. And the better you're going to be as an offense.
Brian, getting into the final part of the show here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're going to start talking about expectations for this unit. And like we just got done saying, there are some unknowns. We have faith and we believe that this could happen. We believe that Cam Williams has the ability to break out. Will he? We don't know. Same thing with Aeneas Williams, the offensive line. We have an idea of what 2026 CJ Carr is going to look like, but until those things start to unfold on the season, we don't fully know what that's going to look like. Stat lines, in-game performance, in the clutch, in the postseason. There's a lot of different questions. With that being said, though, that doesn't mean the expectations change. The thing that stands out about championship caliber programs is no matter who's lining up, no matter who changes their number, who comes in the portal, or who leaves, or who elects to stay, the standard has to remain the same. And that's going to be the task for Notre Dame's offense this year after they have to replace impactful guys like Jay Love and Jadarian Price and Malachi Fields and 2 captains on the offensive line. So when we have this conversation, Brian, around expectations for the 2026 offense, where do you start? Where do you begin to look at where they have to be?
Well, I mean, look, it's what they need to be and then how they get there. And then what do they need to be? Once again, you need to be one of the best scoring offenses in college football. And best scoring offenses in college football doesn't even necessarily mean that you rank in the top 5. It's part of it. It's a byproduct of it. But Ohio State didn't rank in the top 5 at the end of the year in 2024. They would have if you took what they did in the postseason. They were an elite offense in the postseason. But that's more of what I'm referring to. Can you go out there and score against the best teams on your schedule in the regular season? Can you score in Provo? Can you score on November 7th when Miami comes to town? Can you score on whatever date SMU comes to town? Can you score in round one? Can you put the ball in the end zone when you need to in the quarters? Can you put the ball in the end zone when you need to and have those game-winning drives in the semis? And can you come out there and take it to a team early, jump on a team early, and stay that way in the championship game? Where your defense doesn't have to play Hercules football every big game to win. It's a great team effort to where, there's a lot less pressure on the defense knowing that, hey, man, all we got to do is just get some stops. And for our team, stops are field goals. Because with the way our offense scores, if we hold them to field goals every time, we're going to win this football game. And that's going to be the key. It's yes, I want to see them be a top 5 scoring offense again next year. No doubt. We said that we thought that they were going to score over 40 points a game this year, and they did score over 40 points a game this year. Or I shouldn't say we did. I don't know that we did predict it. I know we said we think they can and should be over 40 points a game. And they were. And I want to see that again next year. But over 40 points per game, and then you go lose 31-17 in the semifinals, okay, fine. You weren't an elite offense because you couldn't do it when it mattered most. I want to know what you can do when it matters most. I mean, they were about 40 points a game last year going in the playoffs. And then it went down because you couldn't score the way you needed to in the postseason. I don't want to have to hope that I can get when you go play Georgia in the playoffs in 2026, I don't want to have my fingers crossed hoping that you can get a strip sack with 30 seconds left, punch it in the end zone, and have a kick return for a touchdown to start the next half, and you outscore them 17-0 in 50 seconds, and then get outscored the other 59 minutes of the game. I don't want to have to rely on that. I want it to be where, like, dude, you can't stop us. So our defense is going to end up feasting on you because you're trying to get out of your element to keep up with us. That's what I want to see from this offense in 2026. Great way to do that, Trev. Big picture, be better at starting fast.
Yeah, that's going to be imperative. I mean, it all works together. Starting fast is huge. Last thing I'll say on the point that you just talked about. In the moments that matter most, the scoring will always be relative. Like, we can have an honest conversation. Even some of the most elite offenses don't score as many points against top 15, top 10 opponents that they do against a 5-7 team.
Right.
And that's totally fair, as long as it's relative. But what impressed me so much about the offense against Texas A&M is that was the first time in quite some time that Notre Dame, on offense alone, scored over 30 points against a ranked P14. Think about it. They didn't score over 30 points offensively against Pitt. They didn't score over 30 points offensively against any team in the playoffs. They didn't do it against Louisville, or they might have done it against Louisville last year in 2024. They scored 31 offensive points. They did do it against Texas A&M.
They had a drive that went 4 yards in that game, by the way,
to get to 31, essentially. Like,
correct.
I mean, that's so. Point being, is it relative? Yeah. Do I think that Notre Dame is going to go score? Does Brian think that Notre Dame is going to go score 42 points per game in the postseason? No. Do they have the potential to do that? Yeah. That's not the expectation, though.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. That's not the expectation, though. It has to be relative to the competition that you're facing. It can't be 42 points against Stanford and Syracuse and North Carolina. Then you play Miami. That's what was so frustrating about the 2023 offense. You decimate Central Michigan. You decimate Navy. But starting fast is going to be huge. Once again, bringing up the points per game piece. In the early window, especially in season openers, Notre Dame has only scored more than 24 points on offense once in Marcus Freeman's tenure. They scored 10 against Ohio State in the season opener in 2022. They scored 42 against Navy in 2023. They scored 23 against Texas A&M on the road in week 1 in 24. And they scored 24 in 2025 in week 1. You got to be able to start faster. Have to be able to start faster. I'm with you.
You talk about the postseason. You look at last year's playoff teams, 2024 playoff teams. Notre Dame was 4th out of 4 teams in scoring. They scored 25 points a game. Texas was at 27.5. Penn State was at 32.5. Ohio State was at 36.3. Ohio State didn't score 40 points a game, but they scored more than anybody else did in the playoffs. This year, you look at the semifinal teams and you look at what they did. in their points per game. You had Ole Miss scored second or scored the most at 35.7. Indiana scored 33.5. Actually, that's incorrect. I'm sorry. Indiana was number one because I counted their game against Ohio State. But Indiana led all four of the semifinal teams in scoring. They averaged 40.3 points per game in the playoffs. Ole Miss was next. They were at 35.7. Oregon was at 32.1, and Miami was at 21.5. Now, ironically, the team that scored the fewest of the four semifinal teams made it to the championship game both years, but they lost both times to the team that scored number one, the most points per game, not total points per game. The last 2 years, the team that scored the most points of the playoff teams that played more than one game or two games of the four semifinal teams, the team that scored the most in the playoffs won the championship per game. You say, well, yeah, you won it all. Of course. No, you could score, 24 points in one game, 24 in another, and then you win it all. And this other team scores 50. You know what I mean? Like there's things, but like you were the number one scoring team by 3 or more points over the other four semifinal teams because you could score. You have to score in those games. So, that's key. It's going to be huge. And for Notre Dame, it's going to continued balance is going to be key, Trev. Like, yes, I think they're going to be a better throwing team in 2026. I expect CJ Carr to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think he has a chance to be a Heisman contender. I think, Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse. We're going to preview the off receivers soon. Quincy Porter, Mylan Graham, Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, Logan Saldate. I mean, Elijah Burris, the freshman. I mean, it's such a talented group, a talented room. And there's a lot they have to prove. I think it's going to be a fun year. I think there's talent at tight end, but at the same time, Mike Denbrock still wants to have a balanced offense. And you're going to have to maintain that because I don't want to put it to where if CJ has an off day, you're going to struggle. CJ has an off day because you're playing to stop CJ. Fine, we'll go run for 240 yards. I still want that to be who this Notre Dame football team is. Even if it is your pass game is still the best part of your offense, it can't dominate your offense the way that can be a tendency to be when you have a quarterback like CJ Carr.
Absolutely. I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about winning a championship, not just getting back there, just getting back to the semifinals. I've seen Notre Dame teams in the past. There's a laundry list of teams of Notre Dame in the past that have been dominant on the ground. You can't just have one. The best teams that have won historically, given a couple outliers, have been a very, very balanced team. I mean, even 2020 Bama, who had Devontae Smith and Mac Jones, Najee Harris was still an integral part of that offense. In 2019 with LSU, with all those receivers, Clyde Edwards-Helaire still rushed for over 1,000 yards and had like 16 rushing touchdowns. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that crazy Alabama 2019 LSU game still had more total touchdowns as an individual player than any other person on the field, not named Joe Burrow. So you need the balance. We've seen Notre Dame teams before in the past light it up through the air. 2009 Notre Dame, 2015 Notre Dame. I would argue 2018 Notre Dame with how Ian Book played in 2018.
When Ian stepped in the starting lineup, that offense scored a ton of points. And they threw the ball for over 300 yards a game, but Deck still did his thing. Like, that's a great point, Trev. I'm actually going to look that up, by the way, while you're talking to back your point up. Keep going.
Yeah, man. It's just the balance is imperative. I mean, look at Ohio State, and I've used this example quite a bit. I've always been, for the last 5 to 10 years, the success dictated by Ohio State in the postseason is their ability to run the football. Some people take that as, so they just can't pass it anymore. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have to remain balanced because every year, what's the given with Ohio State, Brian? They're going to have an electric pass game and amazing weapons on the perimeter. I have never questioned that. But why did guys like Kyle McCord, who the year after he left Ohio State led all of the NCAA in passing, and guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison not win a national title at Ohio State? Because at the time, their running backs were Chip Trainum and Mayan Williams because Travian Henderson was hurt. Balance is imperative. Again, there's always outliers. Michigan's offense in 2023, I would argue, wasn't balanced. J.J. McCarthy won a football game thrown 8 times. But what did they have? An elite defense, an elite offensive line, an elite run game. So it's not a one size fits all conversation, but balance is just absolutely huge. And for each team, it's a different conversation of how you get there. For Notre Dame, it's more of an elevated pass game. Keep doing what you're doing on the ground. I agree completely.
Yeah, like you look at Notre Dame in 2018, like you talked about, Trev, and when Ian Book got sent in the starting lineup, start Wake Forest, from that point on, Notre Dame's passed for 274 yards per game, 274.5 yards per game, which is a pretty good number, and that includes only throwing for $160 against Florida State. And actually, if you really look at it, because they had the game where Ian missed, in the games where Ian Book was the starter, so that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 games. In the 9 games that Ian was started, because remember he got hurt against Florida State.
Yep.
And got hurt that game. They passed for 290.5 yards per game. But they still, during his stretch as a starter, ran for 241 against Wake, ran for 274 against Stanford, ran for 254 against Navy, only went for $167 against Virginia Tech. But remember, there was a 97-yard touchdown or run in that game, ran for 254 against Navy, ran for 171 against Syracuse. And then in other games where they got shut down running the football, Northwestern held them to 121 and USC held them to 121. They passed for 343 and 352 in those games because those teams were focused on stopping the run, and Ian went off. And then other teams were, you know what I mean? And then other games, they were saying, hey, we're gonna stop the run. Ian goes off. But then other games, hey, we're going to try to slow down these receivers, and then Dexter would go off. It made you very hard to stop week after week. And we saw flashes of that this year. NC State was like, we are not going to let Jeremiah Love beat us. And CJ Carr was like, word, I got you. And threw for like 340 in that game. You know what I mean? And then USC was like, we're not going to let CJ Carr beat us. And Jeremiah Love was like, word, I got you. And Jardarian Price was like, don't forget about me, and they went out and ran for over 300 yards on him. That's what great offenses, neat championship offenses look like. Texas was dead set on saying, we're not going to let Jeremiah Smith beat us. So he called like one pass for 4 yards. Oh, shoot, we forgot that we need to maybe cover Travion Henderson in this game. And he goes out and has a 7-yard screen pass for a touchdown that, and ultimately, to me, was the difference in that game. And so that's what you want to have. You want to have that type of balance, and you want to be able to beat teams in different ways because it makes you harder to match up against. If you can shut down the run game, and when you shut our run game down, we don't play very well, then, it may not matter because some teams are going to need to commit like 8, 9 guys, shut down the run game, and we're going to light them up. We're looking at it from an offensive standpoint. But when that team's good enough to beat us with 6 or 7, and we don't really have an offense that can throw the ball in those situations, then we're going to struggle. You want to have a team that can, look, you want to take our run game away? Cool, we're going to go beat you over here. You want to take our pass game away? Cool, we have no problem running for 260 on you.
It's just the ability to have answers. It's like the same conversation we just had with the defensive line, just bigger picture. It's an entire side of the football. I love the makeup of the defensive tackle rotation because now, based on the personnel, you have an answer for whatever offensive line that you face going throughout the regular season and arguably the postseason. Being balanced on offense gives you answers for anything a defense can throw at you. And we almost got like an extended trailer of what that's going to be in 2026 from 2025. But there's areas that have to continue elevating. Like, for example, you need more from the pass game. Like, we don't look. CJ Carr had an exceptional year last year. I would contend that he was a top 10, top 7, top 5 quarterback in college football last year, even higher given the category. But it's not like we're looking at his performance in 2025. It's like, cool, just do that.
Right. He needs to get better.
Right. Same thing from the pass game. It's, hey, we saw some things last year that we haven't seen in South Bend in quite some time. More of an attempt to push the ball down the field vertically. More one-on-one opportunities. It's been great. Basically, some of the things that we saw when they were down against Penn State and down against Ohio State, we just saw as a part of the offense in 2025. But it's not good enough to just say, cool, just do that next year. Sure. So definitely need more, even more from the pass game in 2026.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt. It's being able to make those plays in those clutch moments, which we saw flashes of. It's CJ being a better decision maker pre-snap and a better decision maker post-snap consistently. There were games he was locked in and was just dicing people. And then USC, he just never felt comfortable in that game. Just never. And one thing that hurt CJ's statistics in the end of the year was the Syracuse game.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't really know what you're supposed to do in that game. I mean, the kid threw for 49 yards because they'd scored 21 points before he even stepped foot on the field. It's like, well, this isn't going to be a CJ Carr day. Threw 9 passes. I mean, he averaged, what was it? He averaged this season 228.4 yards per game. You take that game out because it was just such an absurd game. And his numbers look a little bit different, and he was at 244.7. I think that's more indicative of kind of the success he had last year. CJ had 2 games of over 300 yards, another of 299, another of 293. I want to see a little bit more consistency from him in those areas, Trev, and continue to just show a better feel for the offense. Which, again, these aren't criticisms of CJ. These are acknowledgments of what it's going to look like when you're a redshirt freshman making your first career starts. You're going to have some days like that, or you're going to have some drives like that. Now it's about, instead of having an off game, CJ has an off half or off quarter or series, and then he's able to, now that he's more experienced, knows what to do to get out of that funk more than he did in his first year as a starter. That's what growing up is for a kid like CJ Carr. He'll be stronger and all those type of things, but it's really about being able to just consistently be that best version of yourself, because we saw long stretches of that this season. Long stretches of that where you're like, dude, this kid is unbelievably good. I mean, unbelievably good. And I mean, from A&M until NC State, he was unreal good. He wasn't the reason the offense struggled against BC. And then he kind of, wasn't as great down the stretch after the Navy game, his last 3. But, like, there's a lot of football from A&M until Navy where CJ Carr was big time. But now it's about just even greater consistency.
Well, and his continued growth is going to get more out of the passing game in some of the things that we talked about yesterday. More post-snap switches, more pre-snap motion, getting the ball in the hands of receivers more on the run, because the more experienced and the more comfortable he gets, the more Mike Denbrock's going to continue to open up the playbook. The more backside dig routes, the more backside curl routes are going to get hit. And now you're not only working with 50% of the field. That's another thing too.
I mean, Fernando Mendoza was clutch in the championship game, but let's be honest, they had a lot of throws where he was throwing the ball either behind the line of scrimmage or a couple yards past the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
Because they had receivers that could make plays with the ball. It was very clear with the additions that they have made over the last year at receiver. And I'm not just talking about Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter. I'm also talking about Caden Finley, Bubba Frazier, Braden Robinson, Dylan Faison, that a big part of what they're looking for is at the position is also, hey, yeah, we want to be able to throw the ball down the field and be vertical and all that. And they definitely want to still do that. But we might want to go out and get some guys that we can throw screen passes to or quick game to, and they can go do damage. I think that's a big part of what you want to have as a part of your offense as well. I'm not someone who believes in that needs to be your primary part of your offense. I mean, that's pretty much what Clemson is, and I hate their offense. But you look at Fernando Mendoza, Trev, he went 12 of 14 in the championship game on throws of less than 10 yards.
Wow.
And he went, 4 of 11 on throws 10 yards down the field. And they won the game. He only threw for 75 yards, throws beyond 10 yards. CJ Carr did that on 1 pass, basically, against Miami. But what could Notre Dame not do in that game? They didn't have receivers that were taking quick throws and going and doing damage. Part of that was Miami played Notre Dame differently than they played Indiana. They were giving Indiana some of that stuff. They weren't doing that against Notre Dame. But anyway, I think that's part of it too, is getting more of that from Faison and Greathouse and Mylan Graham, and getting more of that from the receiving core is also part of it. This isn't just about CJ Carr. This is also about that. Throwing a check down to Aeneas Williams and he makes 3 people miss and turns it into a 15, 20-yard gain. I mean, those are things that you want to see as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Some of the expectations and the improvements that we're expecting to see this year, some of them are a little bit more in the weeds and needs a little bit more explanation. Other ones like this one are pretty simple. You have to be better in the red zone.
Don't suck in the red zone. That's pretty much what I have to say about that one.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. It's got to be better.
I took that graphic down, but I want to pull that up again because this is just so absurd, Trev. Let me just pull this up real quick. This is the craziest thing. I don't know that I've ever seen a statistic like this. I really don't. I'm going to pull this up again. Notre Dame ranked second in college football in points per game, second in yards per play, fifth in big plays. And yet they did all that while ranking 118th in red zone offense. Now, part of it was you had some of your own mistakes. I mean, you get the ball down at the 1 yard line and you false start against, was it Boise State or was it NC State? I think it was Boise, right? You false start at the 1 yard line. You got to go back to the 6. You don't get it. You go for a fourth down. You don't get it. Those are on you. That's a you problem. That's not play calling. That's you didn't line up. You didn't do what you needed to do when it mattered most. Come on, you got to be better than that. And there were times that there were coaching mistakes. I mean, lining up and going wildcat in certain situations. Like, just why? Why are you doing that right there? That's not who you are. I mean, so yeah, there was blame to go all around. Field goal kicking was just absolutely atrocious last year.
Yeah.
But imagine if Notre Dame just ranked 50th in red zone scoring, just 50th. That's it, just 50th. What does their points per game look like?
I mean,
so yeah, you got to get better there, Trev. That's an easy one. You got to get better there. It's the craziest thing ever. I still can't believe that.
No, me neither. I mean, they ranked 130th in field goal kicking percentage, 118th in the red zone, and scored 42 points a game.
Dude, 2 years in a row. Like, they've ranked that low in field goals percentage 2 years in a row. Notre Dame this year ranked 130th in college football with a 55.6% field goal rate. They made more field goals in the playoffs last year than they made all of 2025. Did you know that? They made 7 field goals in the postseason. Again, what did it look like when Mitch Jeter was healthy? 7 field goals in the postseason in 2024. They made 2 against Indiana, 3 against Georgia, 2 against Penn State. 7 field goals. This year, they made, and they went, what was it, 7 of 9 in the postseason. Made all 6, 8, made all 9 of their extra points. They went 5 of 9 this year for the entire season. They didn't make a single field. They went 0 for 3 on field goals in the last 6 games of the year.
Yeah,
they made 2 field goals against A&M, 2 against NC State. In the other 10 games, they made 1 field goal and missed 4 extra points. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds almost like a cop-out answer, but just by default, it can't be that bad in 26. Just unless you start missing stuff on purpose.
But I thought that after 2024, and I didn't finish my it's my bad. I didn't get to the point because I shockingly got off course again. But as bad as the 55.9 was, it was 55.6, right? Isn't that what I said it was? 55.6. In 2024, Notre Dame ranked 128th in field goal kicking with 55.6. The difference was they still made 15 of them. Right. They went 15 of 27. This year, Freeman just gave up on even trying to kick field goals. Like, screw that. We're not kicking a field goal, like, ever again.
I don't blame him.
And I think after the USC one, I don't think that they tried another one. Am I wrong on that? Was that the game? Was that the last one?
No, they attempted one against Boston College. Yeah,
they tried one against Pitt. That's right. Yeah, Pitt. They tried one, and Eric Schmidt missed it. It was early in the game, and it was like, "Yeah, we're done with that."
I think it was the first drive of the game. I think the first drive of the game they did, and that, yeah, goodness gracious. Yep. Red zone absolutely has to get better. Now, Brian, on top of the expectations, we're also going to tie a bow on this entire segment, and we're going to talk about the keys to success. Just like every pregame show that we do in the middle of the seasons on Thursdays, we obviously have our keys to success. And where that's going to start for Notre Dame's offense, and it's something that we have been saying ad nauseum since the start of the offseason, it's the offensive line becomes elite.
Yeah.
That's key number one.
There's 3 big picture things we're going to talk about. Number 1, as you said, the offensive line has to be elite. And what does that entail? Like, listen, I don't care what you want to say. You can make whatever excuse you want to make, injuries, whatever. I'm going to absolutely refuse that Notre Dame hasn't had enough talent to be better on the offensive line than they have the last few years. And you can say injury this, injury that, whatever. At the end of the day, it's not even about blaming. This is just a fact. They have been nothing better than a good offensive line the last couple of years. That's it.
Yep.
They haven't had a great offensive line since 2020. It's the last time they had a great offensive line or anything close to being great. We saw some stretches in 2022. Was probably the longest stretch of like, boy, this offensive line's playing at a really high level right now. I mean, that was obviously the year we saw the Clemson game where they just manhandled Clemson up front and just dominated them in the run game. Obviously we saw some stretches then, but even then there was also, those stretches were great, but the Ohio State game was terrible. The Cal game wasn't that much. It really was. The Marshall game was actually pretty bad too. It really wasn't until the second half of the Cal game that the offensive line really started to figure it out that year. And obviously they got better. And towards the end of the year, they were, when you consider the fact that in 2022, Notre Dame ran for 189 yards a game in an offense that just literally could not throw the football, it's pretty impressive. And, that year they finished the year, like I said, averaging 188 yards per game. But if you look at like after the first 3 games and just they were 210.5 in the last 10 games. They went over 200 yards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the last 10 games. They went over 100 yards or 200 yards. In 2023, they only went over 200 yards 4 times the whole year. Last year, obviously, they went over 200 yards a lot more than that. They were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in the regular season. And then this year they had some games, but this year there was too much inconsistency in the run game. And they've done all this with really big time running backs and just solid line play. Solid line play is not going to get it done. I watched Indiana not play solid offensive line. And I'm like, dude, this is what an offensive line is supposed to look like. Say, well, they only rush I don't care about the yards and the yards per play. When they needed yards, they got them like every time against Miami. Every time. And I'm thinking like, you're doing that with a guy that Joe Rudolph twice like kind of wanted to get rid of in the starting lineup. Didn't think he was good enough. And honestly, that wasn't a wrong decision by Joe Rudolph. They did have better players than Pat Coogan. That's the whole point. And they still went out and had a worse offensive line than Indiana. I'm not saying they were terrible he has not had a bad offensive line. The 23 team had stretches of being bad, but they also had some stretches of playing great. Good is not good enough when you're talking about Notre Dame. It just isn't. And that's got to change in 2026.
Yeah, the driver of that success is going to be Joe Rudolph, the offensive line coach. No doubt about it. And it starts with putting people in the right spot. In the starting lineup, in the 2 deep, in the 3 deep. No more, I moved this guy because we already know that he can. No, none of that this offseason. Get guys the reps in the spots that they need to be in. That has to be a non-negotiable this year. Put guys in the right spots to succeed. Just because that Mike Denbrock knows that CJ Carr can play quarterback, he's not taking reps at running back in the spring because he knows what he can do at quarterback. You can miss me with that stuff. I'm sorry. Like if I go to a spring practice and I see
that's one of the dumbest answers I've ever heard an offensive line coach. Why is Will Black playing tackle? Well, we know he can play tackle. Let's see what he can do at guard. They kept playing him there all year. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard an offensive line coach say ever.
Craziest answer I've ever heard. Just the craziest answer I've ever heard. If I go to a post or a preseason practice and I see Grayson McHugh taking reps at right guard, I'm going to lose my mind. Yeah. Like it starts with putting people at the right spot on first, second, and third team, bro.
It's going to happen. I promise you it's going to happen.
I know.
They signed 3 5-star tackles in Joe Rudolph's tenure, and every single one got moved to guard. Every single one got moved to guard. If I don't laugh, I'm going to cry. It's just as ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, it's absolutely bonkers. But look, and as I've said before, the opposite is Joe Rudolph sucks. No, he doesn't. He doesn't suck. He's a good offensive line coach. Indiana had an elite offensive line coach. And that's why a bunch of dudes that are late day 2 or most likely day 4 draft picks or day 3 draft picks and guys that Notre Dame didn't want anymore, a guy that Notre Dame didn't want anymore, came together to form an offensive line that led them to a championship. And Notre Dame's line with all their high-ranked players and all these studs and future day 1, day 2 draft picks can't do the same. I mean, think about how those offensive linemen looked against Miami, and then think about how this offensive line that Notre Dame had looked against Miami. And your 2 worst players were your 2 most experienced. Your 2 tackles who started more than anybody else on the offensive line combined going into that game. So that's a big part of it. And then, here's another key, getting Charles Jagasaw back. I don't care how good of a job Joe Rudolph does this year. His line will be better if he has Charles Jagasaw in it and has it in it for the whole year. And I don't know if we're going to see Charles Jagasaw. I mean, with the injury history he's had, and then also with the severity of the injury he had last year, you don't know that a guy's going to recover. Sometimes guys don't ever come back to where they were. Jalen Smith ended up making the Pro Bowl and having some good years in the NFL. He was never the same athlete he was at Notre Dame, ever. Is Charles Jagasaw going to be able to get back to being like? I don't know the answer to that. I'll tell you what, one of the most excited things I'm going to feel is if we get out there to that first spring practice and we see Charles Jagasaw going through drills and hitting bags and in the lineup, I'm going to feel great. But until then, it's like, well, we'll see. But let's be honest, Joe Rudolph could do the best coaching job that he's ever done this year, but it's going to be an easier coaching job if he's got Charles Jagasaw in the lineup. There's no question. And then the other one, Trev, is we need to see big jumps from Kirby Lambert and Anthony Knapp, wherever they're playing. It's irrelevant. We need to see big jumps from them. If you move Anthony Knapp inside, like I think they should do, he still needs to make a jump. And that year 3 starter jump. If he stays at left tackle, he needs to make that year 3 starter jump. Same thing with Kirby Lambert. Wherever you want to play him a right guard, right tackle, left tackle, I don't care. What I need to see, though, is you need to look like that 5-star player more consistently. At times, Kirby was your best lineman last year. At times. At other times, he looked like a talented redshirt freshman who wasn't sure what he was doing, which you're going to expect. Now he's got that experience under his belt, another full offseason. I expect big things from them. So, I mean, those are your 2 leaders that are going in the offseason healthy. Ashton Craig will be a leader for you, but I don't know when he's going to be back. I doubt that it's going to be for spring ball. I don't know when he's going to be back and healthy and full go. Be awesome if he was back early, but he's going to be a leader off the field. But the other guys need to be leaders on it and in the weight room and make those jumps. Those 3, Jagasaw getting back to health, and then Lambert and Knapp stepping up and improving their game are keys that'll then make Joe Rudolph's job easier. And that's true for all coaches. When your best players put in the work to better themselves on their own time, which you need to do, then that makes your job as a position coach a lot easier.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. Second key, Brian, quarterback. And it's CJ Carr is who we think that he has the opportunity to be this year. That's going to be a huge key to success as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is short and sweet, Trev. We talked about this a lot earlier in the show. CJ Carr, we expect him to make a year or 2 jump in the starting lineup and go from being one of the better quarterbacks in the country to one of the best quarterbacks in the country. A guy that carries the offense, a guy that makes those clutch money plays, a guy that is more consistent, a guy that shows even better grasp of the offense. Those are all things you expect to see in your second year as a starter, and we want to see CJ make those jumps. If this offense is going to be good enough to go compete for a championship, and that's what ultimately these standards are, the expectations are, then it's going to require CJ Carr to make that jump. And I'm not asking CJ Carr to look like Joe Burrow this year. I don't need him to be that. I just need him to be the best version of himself next season. And that's it. And if he does that, he'll be a great quarterback. And I think him playing at that level is going to be a big key for Notre Dame.
Absolutely. Like any championship caliber team, you need your level of star power to show out. And going into this year, CJ Carr is your star power. He is. There's other players that have, there is a host of players on this offense that have the potential to be, but right now he is your bona fide star going into the year. Talk about Faison, maybe Greathouse returns back to what he was against Penn State and Ohio State. Who knows what the Ohio State receivers do, or Cam Williams or Micah Gilbert or the running back room. It's going to be big for him. But speaking of the wide receivers, Brian, that is the final key that we're going to talk about here. Not the only, but just 3 overarching. And the last one is just an elevated play from the wide wide receiver position as a whole. That's going to be huge for this offense.
Absolutely. The receivers were good last year. They need to be even better this year. They need to be more impactful. They have to be more consistent in the run game. They have to be more consistent with their effort. They have to be more consistent winning contested catches. They have to be more consistent with their just urgency that they play with, and they need to continue to make more and more plays. I thought the receiving corps played well. They played good football last year. Malachi was everything I hoped he would be as far as how he played. Now, the production wasn't there, but he can't throw to himself. And part of the reason the production wasn't there is because he had a really good tight end and a really good Z, and a slot was productive. You had a running backs that were making big plays out of the backfield. CJ Carr threw back-to-back touchdown passes against Arkansas that didn't go past the line of scrimmage because he just threw it to the running backs and they both kind of went crazy. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to take away from his production, but I thought Malachi was a dude last year. And Jordan Faison stepped up. But I think there's another level this unit needs to get to. And a big part of it is consistency. It's I want to see Jordan Faison play about 10 to 15 less snaps a game, but then be able to give me a little bit more urgency on the snaps he does play, because I want him staying fresher in the fourth quarter. I want him, like I say this a bunch. What's it going to look like on the last drive of the game when Jordan Faison's going into that last drive with 40 snaps under his belt and the corner's going into that drive with 60 snaps under his belt? And he's had to chase Jordan and Mylan Graham or Greathouse or Burris or whoever around the field. How's it going to be in that championship game on that final drive of the game when Jordan Faison is getting ready to take his, 530th snap of the season, and that cornerback is getting ready to take his 930th snap of the season? You know what I mean? Like, it's not about, I don't want him to play as much because he's not good. No, it's about, dude, I want him fresh in the biggest moments of the game. And the more fresh I can keep him by rotating him in and out. Look, if Jordan Faison runs a go route, take him out for a play or two and let him walk back, and then and then that next guy can go out there and go make a play. You've got the talent to do so. And then imagine how fresh 2 plays later when Jordan Faison gets back in the game, having not had to sprint back and then sprint down again and then sprint back, he's going to be on that 3rd down and 7. You know what I mean? And then you're like, why is he jogging on the backside dig? Well, because he's freaking tired, man. He's been running go routes and post routes for the last 15 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, he's the number 4 read. He's probably thinking, I'm probably not going to get the ball here. So it's not, he needs to play less because other guys are better. I'm just telling you, this is a receivers coach. I want my guys fresher. And in early in the year, I think Notre Dame did want to go with a deeper rotation, and then Greathouse got hurt. Micah Gilbert got hurt. He was banged up. And so you had to shorten the rotation. I do think Mike Brown genuinely wants a deeper rotation. Because if he didn't, then why did he play 5 receivers in the opener? Why did he play 5, 6 receivers in game 2? The 2 biggest games you're going to play all year. And like I said, guys got banged up. Greathouse got hurt. Micah Gilbert was banged up. And he clearly didn't trust KK in some of the bigger games. Okay, it is what it is. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. But that unit needs to step up and raise their level of play to an even greater degree. I'm watching the Indiana game. I'm thinking I don't expect Notre Dame to look like Ohio State's core last year. I don't expect them to look like Jeremiah Love or Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, because they don't have those guys, in my opinion. Not yet. But I'm watching Omar Cooper, and I'm watching Charlie Becker, and I'm watching Elijah Surratt, thinking there's no reason Notre Dame can't have a receiving core like that. None. And that's
the biggest thing. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, Brian, is you need now multiple guys to have the Malachi Fields level of impact. Because there were moments where when they needed to jumpstart the offense, they were throwing go balls and jump balls and one-on-one situations to Malachi Fields. But if a team were able to take that in the way in the postseason, I don't know what this offense looks like. Can you rely on Jordan Faison and Will Pauling to move your offense in the pass game? I don't know the answer to that question. But what made Indiana so special is, this drive, it was Omar Cooper's drive. The last drive, it was Elijah Surratt's drive. Charlie Becker has the catch that essentially ices the game and sets up that crazy touchdown run by Fernando Mendoza. Yeah.
He had a couple crazy catches in that game.
And not to mention E.J. Williams, the oldest receiving core oldest receiver in their room, didn't really have that big of an impact, mostly because they didn't need him to. Mm-hmm. That's the spot that Notre Dame needs to be. And it's, how do you stop Greathouse and Faison? It's not an or. That's what I want fans to get out of the mindset of it. It's not an or, it's an and. How do you stop Faison and Greathouse and Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter and Cam Williams. It's not, it should be this guy or this guy because I really like this guy. Receiver play has to step up in every aspect. Route running consistency, finishing plays off consistently, more elevation in the run game, all encompassing. And it's going to be huge this year, man. Absolutely going to be huge.
Yep.
Well, Brian,
we did
I know we have
super chats. Yeah, go ahead, Trev.
Well, I was going to say, I know we have a couple of super chats before we get out of here today.
Yes, we do.
Get those pulled up here quickly. One from Packers Total Access. Appreciate you. How much playing time do you think Freaky Hola will get this season? Loving this defensive front, fellas.
I don't know that he's going to play a whole lot right now. I'm not expecting the freshman to come in and play a lot right away. I just think there's a lot of depth ahead of them, but I think he's capable of getting action. There's no doubt. I think Clayton just wanted a chance to say Freaky Hola, which I appreciate. You know, sometimes you stumble into a good one, and hopefully that's a good one. But I don't anticipate him playing a ton, but I also think he's going to make it a tough decision. I think him and Elijah Golden are going to make the decisions a little bit challenging on redshirting them this season. I just hope both of them are patient. Your time will come. Just be patient.
Super chat from Doug Troyer. Appreciate you, Doug. When they scored 28 points against Boise State, I said, that's it?
Yeah, because like they moved the ball on him, Doug. I mean, that was the frustrating thing about that game is Notre Dame moved the ball on Boise State. You know, they averaged 7.2 yards per play. They had 389 total yards, 200 rushing, 200 passing, but you know they just couldn't put the ball in the end zone. You know, I mean, they went 0 for 3 on 3 of 4 in the end zone or in the red zone, right? You had the one where you got stopped at the goal line, and then your defense kind of let them convert a couple drives the second half, the ball a whole lot. But that game should have been like 42-7. It should have been a blowout.
Well, I mean,
they had other missed opportunities in that game as well. Like didn't even play well and beat them 28-7. And that was during a very frustrating time of the year. Because like we just watched what we saw against Arkansas, and then the next two games you're like you went 5 of 8 in the red zone against NC State. You beat NC State 36-7. You went 4 of 8 in the red zone. You know, it was frustrating. And didn't they throw a pick against Boise as well? Or that was NC State, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was NC State? Yeah.
I mean, they had what 4 Maddox? They picked off Maddox Madsen like 4 times.
Yeah.
I mean, they had just as many interceptions as they had touchdowns, and not every interception led to a touchdown. Right. I think that's the frustrating part is to your point, Brian, that game should have been at least 42-7.
I mean, you beat NC State 36-7 and you fumbled the ball inside the 5 and threw a pick in the end zone.
Yeah. I mean, you beat NC State 30. Yeah. What'd you say? 36-7, 36, right?
36.
I mean, it was like 17-7 midway through the third quarter. I mean, it's not like they just jumped out to a big lead and took their foot off the gas. They had to put their foot on the gas for it to be 36-7.
Yeah. Well, and like they were moving the ball on NC State, and then that was another game where, you know, you'd get frustrated because they'd get down there and then just not score, and the red zone was a very frustrating thing for Notre Dame. I mean, you scored a touchdown on your first drive. Then on your second drive, you get the ball all the way down to the NC State 17-yard line, and you get sacked. And then you punt your next 2 drives. You throw a pick in the end zone on your next drive. Balls at the 8-yard line. You throw a pick in the end zone. You get a field goal at the end of the half, and it's 10-7. It should have been 24-7, but it's 10-7. You go 3 and out on your first drive, and then you score 2 touchdowns. You get a pick, and you go 4 plays, and you only get a field goal. You throw another pick, and then you fumble the ball inside the 5-yard line, and then you score in your last, real drive of the game. And you're like, dude, this should have been like. But then I'm kind of thinking on my drive home, I'm like, dude, they just beat a really good football team 36-7 and didn't play well. This team is ridiculously talented. That's when it hit me. That's when it truly hit me how good this team was that game. You're like, they did not play very well and beat a good football team 36-7. Like NC State, Miami played as well as they could have played in that game and won 41-7. Notre Dame played terrible and almost beat Miami. You know what I mean? Like But that's what I want to. I want to not be talking about how good they could be
Exactly.
in 2026. I want to be talking about how good they are and how and that they show it consistently.
Needs to be clear cut and obvious. We can't have to look through the trees to figure out how good this team is and draw those inferences ourselves.
Yep. This is kind of a funny little shot.
Super chat from Jersey Bear. Appreciate you. I can name players from my team's 2023 roster, unlike Indiana fans. Indiana fans die hard since 2024.
There's some truth to that. There's definitely some truth to that.
I know there's truth to that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, go ahead, Trev.
I will bet you money that if you ask an Indiana fan to name a player on their team not from 24-25, one of the first players that they will mention is Michael Penix. Bet money that happens. Yeah. I can guarantee you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at early in 2024, they didn't have their first sellout until after they had started 6-0. They had 44,000 for the FIU game, 39 for the Western Illinois game, 43 for Charlotte, 48 for Maryland. Not until the Nebraska game on October 19th did they sell the stadium out. And then they've sold them out since then. But, yeah, even this year, they had less than 50,000 people there for their first 3 home games.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty funny. Yeah. You guys couldn't get to 50,000 people in your first 3 games of the year. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Like, I'm not saying Notre Dame fans are super excited and pumped up to play Northern Illinois, but Notre Dame still had sold it out. You know, Notre Dame still sold out for Tennessee State, 77,000. Like, come on, bro.
I watched Notre Dame pack the stands in 2007.
Yeah, true.
And they were poo.
True.
Literal poo.
That's actually being kind.
Like that, yeah. Well, well, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Somebody said, why should they know them? It's called being a fan. This is the whole point. It's like, if you don't know the players from the teams that aren't good, then you're not a real fan. You're a fair weather fan. So, yeah, they should know the players. If you're a fan, my point is, don't call yourself a fan if you weren't a fan when times were tough.
Mm-hmm.
Don't. Now, I'm not talking about young people that just kind of getting into football. I wasn't a fan of Notre Dame during the Jerry Faust years because I was 6. I wasn't watching college football. I was watching the NFL. Right. But like, that's what don't tell me you're 30 and just became an Indiana and act like, just became an Indiana fan and act like you've always been an Indiana fan.
Yep.
Like, name me someone from the previous 10 years not named Michael Penix or Antoine Randall. You know what I mean? Like, come on, seriously, give me one. I could name guys like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's hilarious.
I think I could go toe-to-toe naming more Indiana football players than like their new diehard fans. Yeah. I mean, I'm going back to the bag. Jordan Howard, Tevin Coleman. I'm talking about Nate Sudfeld. I go toe-to-toe, bro.
Samson really James didn't play a whole lot. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'd give them a run for their money. Jason Spriggs, O-lineman. Shout out to Elkhart.
Yeah. They had 2 stud linemen on that team because they had another kid that was an all Big Ten kid on that team too. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Jason Spriggs, that's right. That was a good one.
I played against him in high school.
Yep. They can name garbage basketball players, though. So, because there's been a lot of those in Indiana the last 20 years.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, man. Well, Trev, that'll do it for today, man. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, this was
really good stuff.
Fun show, guys.
We'll do defense tomorrow. Yep, we'll do defense tomorrow. And then Friday we'll have the mailbag. So we'll do like a similar show. And then starting next week, we'll start diving into sort of our position previews and some of the topical stuff and things like those. So
IB Nation Sports Beat tonight. How are the guys feeling?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to reach out to Sean. I'm not sure. I know Vince is still sick, but I'm not sure about the guys. Let me see if Sean set a show. Yeah, look, he has a show set for 5:00. So they're going to be doing a mailbag tonight. So It looks like the guys will be going live again tonight. So they'll be back.
Good deal. We love it. Back just like our guy, Jason Onye. Be sure to tune in tonight for the midweek mailbag on IB Nation Sports Beat. Get those questions answered. Brian and I will be back tomorrow. Like you said, we're talking defense. On your way out of here, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live and when the guys over at IB Nation Sports Beat go live. whatever streaming platform you listen to us on. We'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until next time, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel.
Thank you for the super chat from No A Hold. Appreciate you.